Matt, you ready? Matt, you ready? All right. Welcome. This is the July 21, 2021 regular meeting of the Holland City Council. To everyone here that's here in person, welcome, and to everyone watching on our live stream, welcome as well. Before I call the meeting to order, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. We're anticipating that we're going to have a lot of people here tonight, and we're going to do our very best to give everyone the opportunity to watch, to participate, and to address council if they choose. We've provided as many seats as we can in council chambers. If there ends up not being enough room, we do have the opportunity for you to watch on our live stream on the City of Holland YouTube channel. And this meeting will be recorded as well, so you can watch it over and over and over again if you'd like to. We promise you will not miss anything. This council engages in civil discourse. We speak respectfully to each other, we speak respectfully to you, and we expect the same from everyone here. So please be respectful to everyone who speaks tonight and everyone at the meeting. During the public comment periods, and there will be more than one, you will be addressing council. Please direct your comments to the council, not to other members of the audience. This is your opportunity to express your views. Under Robert's Rules of Order, council does not answer questions during public comment period, nor do we or should anyone else engage in any back and forth discussion or debate during the public comment period. There should also be no audience reaction to any comments, whether you are in support of the speaker or otherwise. Also, we do not permit the use of profanity or any obscene language of any kind. So far, everybody has done a very good job. I'd appreciate it if everybody would just keep that up. And also, we do not allow people to hold up signs or placards of any kind in council chambers. So if you have them with you, please set them down or place them by your seat. There may be more people than can fit in council chambers this evening, and we want to give everyone the opportunity to address council. Holland prides itself on being polite and respectful, and to that end, if the council chambers are full, and if there are people outside who would like to address council, we will be inviting the people who are outside who have been waiting to speak first. For those of you who are inside, I promise we'll get to you, but you've got a comfortable seat, and they may have been waiting outside. City staff will let me know when and if there's anyone outside who wants to speak, and when they have all had a turn, I will give all of those who are inside who want to speak the opportunity. And as I said earlier, there will likely be multiple public comment periods during this evening's meeting. The first public comment period is a general public comment period where you can speak on any subject that you choose as long as it is not on another part of the agenda. If you are here to speak in regard to the proposed Unified Development Ordinance or any other agenda item, please hold your comments until we reach that item on the agenda. When we reach that agenda item, I will explain when and how we receive public comments. You may only speak once in regard to any particular agenda item. And for everyone who wants to speak, you will have the opportunity to speak, I promise. Now, with all of that being said, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Peters. Here. Garcia.
Here.
Trethui.
Here.
Aaronshorst. Here. Corbin. Here. Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond. Here. And Mayor Box.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to start our meeting this evening, as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer tonight by our city attorney, Ron Vanderveen, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we would invite you to join us.
If you're willing, please stand and join us in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you that we can come together tonight to do business of the city. We ask for your guidance and your wisdom on the many things that are before council tonight, and even where participants may have different opinions, that we all seek unity for the best of the city. Safe travels we pray for the city manager as he's out in other parts of the state, and seek your guidance tonight. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next are our consent agenda items. These items are considered to be fairly routine and have previously been reviewed by council as part of our packet, and they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the general public or a member of council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. If that happens, it will be placed in its regular sequence on the regular agenda. But prior to asking for that, Brenda, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4B, approval of minutes, July 7, 2021 regular meeting. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, written petitions and communications. Industrial Development District request, Tommy Car Wash System, 1321 M40 and 1301 Waverly Road. 4E, Holland Board of Public Works, transfer of funds for contribution to the city fiscal year 2022, adopt a resolution. 4F, Holland Board of Public Works, Metro permit renewal with Zealand Charter Township. 4G, Holland Board of Public Works, Pine Avenue reconstruction engineering contract. 4H, City Attorney, performers contract for the International Festival revision. 4I, City Clerk, Compensation Commission recommendation. 4J, Transportation Services, authorization to provide letters regarding right-of-way around Admiral and Quality Car Wash fuel stations. 4K, Transportation Services, approval of agreement with CSX for sidewalk crossing at 20th Street. 4L, Transportation Services, approve stormwater maintenance agreement, bill of sale, and right-of-way easement for 1399 East 16th Street. 4M, Transportation Services, approve agreement with the Michigan Department of Transportation for tunnel inspections and compliance with federal tunnel inspection standards. 4N, Management and Administrative Services, revocable license agreement, projecting sign, 215 Central Avenue. And 4O, Management and Administrative Services, fiscal year 2021 Strategic and Business Plan Final Report.
Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed onto the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council? Yes, Mr. Trethewey.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove the consent agenda 4I, which would be 12D2.
All right, 12D. And that is the Compensation Commission recommendation?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Any other items that a member of council would like to have removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council in regard to the consent agenda?
Motion to adopt agenda as presented.
Presented or amended?
Amended.
Amended. We do have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin, Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next is our public comment period. This is the general public comment period. If you have something that you would like to address council in regard to that is not otherwise on the agenda this evening, we would ask that you please come forward to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. We do ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. You can see that there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. Green light means you're doing well on time. Yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and we are very strict about that. So having said that, would you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Joseph Spalding, and I live at 307 Riley Street. Briefly, I just wanted to take a moment and thank this city council. I don't know how many people in this room are aware, how many people on council are aware about how functional y'all are. I attend city council member meetings across the country, specifically on housing-related issues most of the time. We all know that those discussions can get very contentious. There's no place I've ever been in America where residents get 5 minutes to speak. There's no place in America I've been to where residents get 2 minutes to speak and order is maintained. There's no place in America that I've been where the city council members treat each other with a level of respect that you all treat each other. And it literally blows my mind every time, because I have seen these things melt down every which way but loose. And I am just so grateful that I got to move back here, can afford to live here, and I get to live here because I was spending the last 3 years working on this issue in the Bay Area. I was paying $1,800 a month to rent a 300 square foot studio out there, and that absolutely can happen anywhere in America, including West Michigan. And I'm just very, very, very proud about how welcoming Holland had become, because my experience growing up here, and I'm sad to say this, it just was not like that. I experienced some very brutal racism as a Latino. I witnessed some even more brutal racism as a Latino with a white father and a brown mom. I've seen people turn around to my white father immediately after being very disrespectful to my mother, and just total absolute just respect instantaneously because he was a white guy. And I don't feel like that is part of our culture or climate here anymore. And I know some folks don't want to recognize that, but it means the world to me as a Hollander and as someone who always wanted to value this community. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Ann Henriksen, Zeeland. I have seen a new kind of cohesiveness in this 2019-21 administration. It is due to the mayor and his powerful influence as a lawyer. He campaigned on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which includes many people groups, but his greatest promotion is an aggressive LGBT activism. Just a year ago, he strongly maneuvered and voted for an ordinance strategically presented as was your rezoning proposal. This LGBT ordinance opened the door to pride activism. I wonder if the council member realized when they passed this ordinance for housing and employment concerns, it meant that LGBT activism movement would bulldoze Holland. As Mayor Box proclaimed June as LGBT month in Holland, he did this on his own volition without representing the council or those who live here. Jeff Sorensen, director of Out on the Lake Shore, has announced that June 2022 Pride Month will launch new events and initiatives to celebrate LGBT diversity in Holland. The principal downtown Holland marketing coordinator, Kara D. Alvar, announced hiring a diversity consultant to better foster diversity concerns on 8th Street. For example, this year, June Pride Month, there were rainbow flags displayed in the store windows on 8th Street. One store owner explained that even though they did not agree in the LGBT movement, they were told that the rainbow flag means all are welcome in their store and they would serve everyone. The owner lowered her voice and said, I know it means LGBT, but I just didn't want people to think I may not serve them if I didn't have a flag out. This is misrepresentation. The same was told to the residents of American House Senior Living Center because the director, Chris Trevathan, displayed the rainbow flags outside their living areas. Some of the residents took the flag down saying, we know it means LGBT and not what we were told it means all are welcome here. When I talked to him about how upset the residents are about this, he said, the mayor of Holland, a Democrat, made June LGBT Pride Month. He being a gay man, said he deserves to celebrate it. City of Holland Council, when you voted for the ordinance, it was apparent it was under duress. It is clear now that Mayor Box had LGBT activism in mind. Council, apologize to your community. Repeal the rogue ordinance and put in a policy and deal with your mayor. I close with a quote from a little book, How to Kill a Million People, worth a read. Which is more dangerous, politicians with ill intent or those trusting population that trust or those too trusting population that allows such people to lead them? Holland, keep your council's feet to the fire. You're about to lose your city.
Thank you, Ms. Hendrickson. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is our unfinished business. Planning Commission proposed rezoning of 829 East 24th Street from the AGR Agricultural District to the PUD Planned Unit Development District. And this was, I believe this was this the tabled one? Yep, so we're going to need a motion to take this from the table.
So excuse me, so moved.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. Any discussion? And Brenda, would you please call the roll on this?
Peters?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes.
Trethewey?
Yes.
Aaronshorst?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
And Mayor Box?
Yes.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Now we are on to the actual issue of the proposed rezoning of 829 East 24th Street from the AGR Agricultural District to the PUD Planned Unit Development District. Mr. Van Dyken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have our Assistant Community and Neighborhood Services Director, Tricia Dreyer, here to discuss this rezoning tonight. She'll explain it well, but this is related to the rezoning on 24th Street with the development that's going on in that area. So Tricia, we've got some
Great.
slides as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome, good to see you again.
Thank you. Nice to be here. So, in a nutshell, Rest Haven Patrons is requesting that the property at 829 East 24th Street be rezoned from agricultural to planned unit development, also known as PUD. This site is just under an acre and is located adjacent to Rest Haven's existing 37-acre site that is currently zoned PUD. And you can see in the picture the large site and the two small sites that are currently zoned agricultural. Rest Haven is planning to combine these two properties together to implement their proposed farmstead development. The development plan for that project has already been approved by the Planning Commission with a couple of conditions. On May 11, 2021, the Planning Commission held the required public hearing for this rezoning request, and at that time, there were no comments provided by the public. The Planning Commission has determined that this rezoning request complies with other development trends in the area. It complies with the city's master plan, and it also, they got a vote by the Planning Commission members, and it was unanimous to recommend this request to the City Council tonight. So tonight, this is the second reading of the request. The rezoning request did appear on the May 19 council agenda for first reading. And tonight, staff is recommending that council approve the rezoning request for this property at 829 East 24th Street.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Tricia? Oh, great, thank you, Tricia. What is the pleasure of council? Do we need to do a public hearing on this one? I don't. Yep, we do. All right, so I will open this up for public hearing. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak in regard to this agenda item? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is Joe Spalding, and I live at 307 Riley Street on the north side. Just really briefly, council, this is another example of our farmland getting eaten up, and it's not necessarily a bad idea. I think actually this parcel is fine for a PUD, but the issue is more general than this, and I just hope that council will recognize the fact that the shortage of specifically housing, but also all types of land use, as long as we don't add more density, is going to continue into our farmland, and that is going to wreak havoc on our water tables. The Great Lakes do not extend anywhere near as far as anybody believes they do. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Spalding. Anyone else who would like to address council in regard to this particular agenda item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Motion to adopt recommendation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Go ahead.
Support.
Support by Aaronshorst. Any discussion? Seeing none, Brenda, would you please call the roll? So used to saying that.
Garcia.
Yes.
Trethewey.
Yes.
Aaronshorst.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
And Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. In addition to providing in-person public comment opportunities for the public, during COVID, we adopted the ability for people to be able to send us emails as well. We developed an email address, publiccomment@cityofholland.com. Council reviews those emails. We collect them in the interim in between our regular meetings, and then we accept them into the record during our regular meetings. We do not read them out loud at the meeting, but council reviews them ahead of time. Council does also receive communication through other email addresses as well. We each have our own individual email addresses. We also have a city council at cityofholland.com email address. Those emails are received by council. Those emails are reviewed by council, but they're not made part of this public comment portion because they don't go specifically to the public comment address. The assumption is that if you want it made part of the public comment, that it gets sent to that public comment address. So I know that personally I received a number of emails today. I think the rest of council did as well. You may notice that those are not made part of this public comment because they were sent to the City of Holland, or excuse me, the City Council at City of Holland email address. But what is the pleasure of council in regard to the written petitions and communications?
Motion to accept.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion?
Yes, I would like to comment, to thank staff for sending, some notes come on, you can see the title, Climate Change. They're meant for the strategic development team, revisiting the community energy plan. Sometimes they get sent there, sometimes to council, and I've asked they get sent to both, just so we have them. So you'll know as this project comes to you in the future, and so we get, as members of the team, we get to see them. So I appreciate that, following that request.
Great. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting these into the record, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, adoption of ordinance, recommendation to approve the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, for final adoption. Mr. Van Dyken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You, as a council, have discussed this and been presented with information a number of times. Tonight, we have the city attorney has some slides prepared to walk you through kind of the process, should you choose to move this forward this evening. Following that, we have the three items that have kind of staff feels has risen to the top as issues that city council would like to address through this process. There may be more, but that's what we will bring forward to you. As a part of that process in your discussion, Jenna, our now former city planner, has graciously agreed to be with us this evening, so we thank her very much. She will, if you choose to take action tonight, Jenna not only would be able to answer any of those questions you may have during that discussion, but she would also then be able to see this kind of cross that finish line before she moves on to, we don't feel it's greener pastures, but I think she feels are greener pastures, and we wish her the best of luck with that. So with that, Ron would be the next one to present.
Great.
Thank you, Matt. And why don't you go to the next page here? So tonight on the agenda before council is what I call the second reading of the ordinance. First reading was last time. Charter requires it come before council twice before it's adopted. So today is that second time. And it's for the council to decide whether to adopt, whether to reject, whether to send it back for study with planning commission, or to make modifications and adopt the ordinance. Yep.
I just want to make sure you're leaning into your mic because mine was off.
Thank you.
Yes.
And so those are the four options that council has in taking action. Of course, council could table it too, but kick the can down the road. But the four action items are what I mentioned. Staff recommends 3 groups of edits to the ordinance. There's a group of edits that are recommended for the LDR, proposed LDR district, a group of edits for the proposed TNR district, and then a group of edits for the North Downtown District. I never can remember those initials for that one. But those are in 3 groups, and I think it would be easiest if council were to take them as groups, individual parts to those groups, and go forward. Why don't we go to the next one, Matt? So the first step in proceeding on the ordinance is a motion to adopt UDO. Under Robert's Rules of Order, motions should be made in the affirmative rather than in the negative, and then that doesn't mean that everybody's going to vote for it, or even the person making the motion would vote for it. You're all free to make the decision when it's time to vote of yes or no on what's before you. But the normal process, the best process, would be for a motion to adopt, and then it must be seconded. Now, at that point, because there's recommendations for changes, you shouldn't go forward with that motion, but let's go to the next slide, to step 2. And then the step 2 would be a motion by someone, if you're inclined to edit the TNR, for example, a motion to incorporate the TNR edits into UDO, and a second. And then you'd have discussion time and questions you can make for staff to get more information about those edits, and then a vote on the motion. Now, that doesn't adopt those changes, that incorporates those changes into the proposed motion that you had just before. Let's go to the next slide, Matt. So then step 3 I've outlined here is the same type of step, only the LDR district, proposed LDR district. Again, a motion to amend, a second, discussion and any questions, and then a vote. If it's affirmative, we'll put those edits into what you have before you in the original motion. And then step 4, the next slide, would be the Fndt. Now I've got those letters there. Same thing with that, motion, second, discussion and questions, and a vote. And those would be the 3 groups of edits then. Why don't we go on to the next one, step 5. That brings us back to the beginning. You've got a motion then before you. It's either the original motion or it's a motion with amendments that you've adopted. And then it's time to have a public hearing on that motion, to have discussion about UDO and ask any questions again of staff that you need to, and then time to vote on it. Why don't we go to the next slide a minute, Matt? So just in a summary here, we move to adopt, decide on edits and amendments, do the public hearing, discuss it, and vote. That would be the procedure.
All right. Any questions for Ron?
So just to clarify, we move to adopt, but we don't, like, nobody supports that at that point.
No, the motion to adopt initially you'd make the motion and then a second, and that puts it
there
before
would be a
council.
support. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, Ron, would it be sufficient to, if someone were to make an amendment, to make the amendment as simply as accept the recommendation from staff in regard to that particular group of edits?
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
And then specifying the groups again.
Okay. Any other questions from council?
Yet.
Nah. All right. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Motion to adopt recommendation of staff and planning commission on the UDO as presented.
As presented by Planning Commission.
Yes.
All right.
I would support that.
Okay, moved by Trethewey. There is support by Hoekstra. Any amendments to the motion?
Yes. This is where we come in about the,
First discussion, we have to have amendments for discussion. We can have discussion before amendments.
Well,
You could have it either way. It might be easiest to get the motion for the amendments on before you, and you can discuss that motion then.
well, let
And if-
me clarify that from the Robert's Rules side. Are you talking about the specific issues, or are you talking about UDO in general?
Well, we're talking about UDO in general, the way it's being presented by the planning commission.
Okay,
If
but,
we want to make any discussion on edits or anything, that discussion can happen now, or. Yeah, it can happen now, excuse me. It can happen now, or we can make the amendments that we have talked about over.
right, but if you had general comments, then I would probably suggest we do that at this point. But if it's going to be toward the areas that we're talking about as the city attorney laid out, then we should have the motion or a recommendation for an amendment before we have that discussion.
motion and support, and then now another motion. It's possible
At this point, we've got a motion to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission without any changes and support on that. And so the question is, if somebody has discussion, because Scott, I don't want to cut you off at all on that. If there's discussion about that particular general issue, a parliamentarian is saying this is the appropriate time for that. But if it's discussion about one of those three particular areas of where we have previously talked about the possibility of amendments, that Mike's saying what we ought to do is have a motion to amend based on one of those particular areas, support of that, and then discussion of that particular area. I'm getting a nod from Ron that
I'm fine with that.
that's correct procedure.
Sure, the discussion on any of these groups of edits would be appropriate after a motion is made to adopt them, because then you'll have the issue before you.
Okay. Right.
Your
So-
Honor.
Yes, Mr. Hoekstra.
If I could ask a question to potentially muddle this even to a greater degree. We do have the opportunity for the public to comment on this particular item. That's correct.
I'm going to turn that over to Ron.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the public hearing would be held then after any edits by council, and then the public will know what's before council to comment on. So there will be a public hearing.
I guess well, here you can help me clarify and understand better a little bit. Under any item on the agenda, at least most items on the agenda, the public has the right to come to council, come to the podium and comment on that item, correct? So I understand that we'll have a public hearing on this. My thought is the timing of this. I guess if there's folks here who want to feel as though they want to give us advice or their opinion on what they would like us to see us do, is it a little strange to have them do that after we've already decided what to do?
But that's the issue, Dave. We have not decided.
That's
We are-
true.
We are
But if-
putting the motions out there with what we have discussed in the past. So you've got two carts before the horse scenarios here. And what's trying to be accomplished tonight is we want to make sure that we have it very clearly understood from our discussion, from our motion for amendments, if there are to be any, and our discussion, so that the audience really knows what to comment on. Okay?
Okay.
It's an ambiguous statement to a certain extent right now. Again, putting the cart before the horse and.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to eliminate any carts before any horses here if possible.
Gotcha.
My understanding from the way that Ron has laid it out here for us to potentially tackle this is that there are several sections here that we could address potentially with different motions, correct? Like if we wanted to talk about the TRN potential changes, we would make a motion to deal with that and then vote on that.
No,
Well, that's what I just heard.
we vote on the package.
We'd vote on the package, but after, am I right?
Actually, you're both right. You're going to vote on
How
any
is that
motion to amend. You're going to vote on any motion to amend, and then once all the amendments are dealt with, you're going to vote, again, after a public hearing and discussion, you're
Right.
going to vote on the overall package as amended.
So, yes,
If
so
amended.
each one of these items of attention here is gonna come to us, and a motion would be made. Let's amend this to make these changes, right? And we talk about that, and then we vote on that, so then we have made an amendment to the original proposal. We're gonna do that potentially 2 or 3 times, correct? So then, when we're all finished, we vote on the whole, we have a public hearing, and we vote on the whole thing as we've potentially amended it. My point is, and thank you for going with me on this, my point is, if there are points of view that the audience would like to give to us, is it appropriate to make them wait until after we've decided on all the changes that we want to make to it? Or is it appropriate to let them speak before we get into that process of making the whatever potential changes? I'm just posing that question, because I don't want to get all finished with this and have someone say, well, they did what they wanted to do, And then they let us talk, so it was a done deal. Forgive me for being blunt, okay? But I want to avoid that. I want to be as straightforward and, hate to use the word because it's overused, but transparent as possible. So I just lay that out there for my colleagues' consideration. If I'm all wet, tell me that and I accept it, but just, what do you think?
Yeah, Scott, I see you pushed your button.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up too is because while we have amendments before us, there can be additional amendments beyond this. I just want to make sure, I want to ensure that if we have additional amendments or something we want to discuss about additional amendments, that's still fair game as well, not just limited to this. correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's my thought on that, Dave, is that we don't have anything yet for the public to be able to comment on what we're considering. We've just, in my opinion, we've discussed this. We know where we have where we're leaning one direction or another. I think that we've done our best to be able to let the public know about that as well. Also, this isn't the first opportunity that the public has had to give us their opinions on those particular items that are out there. But I think that it's important for the public to be able to know what it is that we're thinking about doing before they let us know what they think about what we're thinking about doing. Now, having said that, I will be here. I am happy to stay here all night through multiple public comment periods, because I think what you're suggesting is the possibility that every time an amendment is made, that we allow for an opportunity for public comment on that particular amendment before we move on to the next item.
I really wasn't thinking that, but if that's the way it works out. I appreciate your comments, and I defer to your direction. I just wanted, it was something that was sort of hanging in the back reaches of my mind, and I wanted to make that, I just wanted to bring
Okay.
it up.
And I'm gonna defer to the city attorney.
Yeah, I wanted to make one other comment. What Council Member Corbin raised earlier about additional amendments. We don't want to overlook that possibility. Until there's a final vote on Udo, you can still make a motion for any type of amendments and go forward. And sometimes from public comments, you come upon something that should be amended.
Yeah. And as well, possibility is we go through the process as was laid out by the city attorney. So let's just assume it's the 3 items of amendment. We vote on doing those amendments. We then open it up for public comment. And based on the public comment that we hear, one or more members of council say, you know what? I've changed my mind on one of those particular amendments and can re-amend and maybe pull that language back out or change that language in some way. So it's not a final package until it's a final package. But I think that what Ron has laid out for us is a way to be able to make it clear to the public what the council is considering, and then saying, okay, tell us what you think about what the council is considering. And then we go back then and discuss and have the ability to make further amendments based on what we hear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And agreeable?
Yeah, I'm just taking note of the time when we begin this, so. Let's get to it.
All right. Any other discussion by council on the motion that we have in front of us right now, which is to accept the recommendation of Planning Commission as is, or is there anyone interested in making an amendment to the motion?
I would like to make a motion to amend the LDR section as per our council discussion on June 23rd, 2021, remove from that section from the UDO eligibility.
So you're saying an amendment to follow the recommendation of staff in regard to LDR?
Correct.
Okay, is that clear enough, Ron?
That is.
Okay. Is there support? Support. All right, moved by Aarons-Horst, support by Garcia. Any discussion on that particular amendment? Or is there any other amendment that anyone would like to make? Oh, we need to vote on, we need discussion on that first, and then we need to vote on that amendment. Yes. Yes, Mr. Hoekstra.
Yeah, we have a slide here before us on, I guess it's up here too. So I guess you all can see that to fully or better understand what it is that what the amendment is that we're talking about. To remove from UDO eligibility for properties 10,000 square foot or greater to have owner-occupied attached ADUs or two-unit conversions. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Cool.
All right. Any other discussion on the amendment? Yes,
I
Mr.
have a
Byrd.
question. Now, LDR did equal R1, correct?
They are essentially the same zone districts, yes.
Okay. So there was a lot of conversation and emails regarding leaving that as R1. Does that fall in this recommendation?
No, the recommendation does not include changing the name back to R1 from the LDR recommendation from Planning Commission.
All right. So I would like to make an amendment to keep it as R1.
We've got to go with the first recommendation first.
Vote that,
on that,
and
and then you
then
can
come
make
back.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Thank you for that. All right. Any other discussion on the
I
amendment?
didn't understand it. What did you say? That would go,
We have an amendment, we have to address that amendment.
Okay,
And then
take
if
care of
there's
that,
any
and then-
additional amendments
I
to be
see.
made, then we
Okay.
can take care of those.
gotcha.
Yeah, just, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Just to follow up on what Councilman
Bird.
Byrd has mentioned. From the last meeting, you explained to me that, R1 was being removed because LDR was consistent on a planning level, on a national level. But you also said that LDR really does not mean single family. Because of the fact we have detached ADUs permitted within that. So that really.
Actually, the flip of that, R1 doesn't necessarily mean single family.
Correct.
Yes,
R1 does not,
right.
because of the fact, you said because of the fact that detached ADUs were permitted.
Yes.
And it had been permitted about 5 years ago.
Yeah, as well as the ability to have borders, multiple unrelated people living in the same residence.
Right. So when I talked to a number of former commissioners, council members that were here 5 years ago, and they mentioned to me that really the emphasis behind that was there were a number of people worried about or had compassion for family members who had disabilities and needed to be independent but still dependent on a family member. It could have been a sibling, could have been a child, could have been a elderly mother, father. And since we've had that, I think we were told by the Planning Commission only 5 have even surfaced. 5 of those have
5
even
detached
surfaced.
exist, yes.
Yeah, and they're not real popular. And they're not real popular is because of the zoning rules make it quite expensive to actually do this. So the question I have for council is, should we just remove that from the language and then make it R1? As you suggested, R1 is only single family. It's not, R1 is not ADUs. ADUs are, part of that, and so it's not just single family. So I guess I would just question the board to say, is it necessary to make this just an LDR zone versus just the traditional R1 that everyone here knows in the city?
Let's hold on that question for the same reason that we didn't accept
Okay.
the amendment from Quincy at this point.
I just want to make
So-
sure I bring that up at the
Yeah,
appropriate time. I think that was the appropriate time to kind of go back to what
Yeah,
Councilman
and what
Byrd said.
we'll make sure that there's the opportunity to be able to make that amendment, and I'm guessing that Mr. Byrd will likely make that amendment, and I'm guessing that he's likely to have support for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we're back to the original amendment, which is to remove from the UDO, the eligibility for properties 10,000 square feet or greater to have owner-occupied attached accessory dwelling units or two-unit conversions in the LDR zoning district as recommended by the staff. Any other discussion on that amendment? Brenda, would you please call the roll in regard to the amendment?
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters. Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
and Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so we have an amended motion. Does anyone like to make any additional amendments to the motion that is in front of us? Mr. Byrd, I'm guessing you probably do.
Yes. I'd like to make an amendment to keep R1 instead of LDR.
All right, is there support?
there is support. There's support. We're going to have discussion right afterwards.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. All right, there's motion support. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, so
Mr. Corbin.
I guess, because of what I just mentioned is the necessity, do we need to keep the detached ADUs? Is that as important anymore going forward? I
Point of
don't
order.
understand.
Point of order. You're drifting off the subject of the amendment. The amendment is just simply changing the wording, not whether the attached ADUs are part of that or not. That would be a totally
Okay,
separate motion.
I'll wait for a separate motion then.
All right.
For a separate motion for what?
I support this motion,
Oh, yeah.
and we
Yeah.
can have more
Yeah.
discussion
So
if you
the-
like.
Let me ask this, so could you make a motion including both of those?
Not now, not at the
No,
moment.
could you?
According to,
Because I could withdraw this motion.
You could withdraw that motion, and you
And
can
clarify.
make whatever
And-
amendment you would like to do, whether it includes one item or multiple items.
Okay, so I think I'll withdraw and then I'll let you make the other.
So
correct
he's withdrawn. You need to
So-
agree to that. As
Support.
you're supporting the withdrawal of that. So we're back to the original one amended motion, singularly amended motion. Is there any discussion, or are there further amendments that council members would like to make?
yeah, so I would like to make a motion to amend, to remove R1 and the detached ADU from the current LDR recommendation before. So there's an LDR recommendation, remove the LDR, right? This is the amendment.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on
Okay,
what it is.
go ahead.
You want to change the designation from low-density residential, the name,
Right,
and change that to R1,
right,
and to disallow in the future detached accessory dwelling units.
correct. And the current ones would become non-conforming, correct, at that point.
Yeah, current ones would be non-conforming, that's correct.
Okay.
Right.
And they are not.
Okay. So there's a
That's
motion
my
on the
motion.
floor.
If you made sense of that, hopefully the clerk was able to make sense of that motion.
Is there support?
Support.
Moved by Corbin, support by Byrd. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Yes, Ms. Raymond.
Yeah, I'm opposed to both of those recommendations. And the planning commission named LDR, it named the zoning districts to represent what they are. High density, medium density, low density residential. It is simply a designation of what it represents, a low density. Currently, we have two detached ADUs being built in the city right now. And I would be very much opposed to not allowing that opportunity for people going into the future. I understand that not many people have taken advantage of it, but they have, and I believe that it should continue to be a right across the city.
Well, I think language matters, and I think single-family residential means single-family residential, and to say low-density, it comes under, I think, what Councilman Hoekstra, you mentioned. Why is this section of UDO so controversial, so upsetting to people? It's maybe the wrong time in history to present something so threatening. We're in the tail end, I hope, of a pandemic, and it just doesn't feel right. And I think the same thing may be happening also with saying low density. So that means, okay, I bought my house in a single-family residential area. Now it's low density because what? Somebody may build. Realistic or not, that I believe is the feeling, and we're starting to hear about that. So we could leave it R1. And I think the unattached ADU is a little bit separate from the name, but I would say keep it R1 or SFR, single-family residential. And that describes it, and it kind of is in the same three little letters we're using all the way through. But it is single-family, and that's what people, they buy in an area, and that's what they think is in the area, and they want to keep it in that area. I will say, as a member of the strategic development team that's revisiting the community energy plan, there will come a time where we do have to think about increasing density in the city, maybe in this way and maybe in other ways. So don't think we'll have to think about it, keep it on your back burner. But for right now, for this passage of this ordinance, this Unified Development Ordinance, I think that the single-family residence designation is appropriate.
Any other discussion from council members? Yeah, Raul.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with Councilman Raymond in the kind of for the same reasons. I think LDR is consistent with the rest of the language. It makes sense to me. To me, it is just a name. The R1 has not been what it's been thought to or understood to be. I think per the ADUs, I mean, the fact that those have been available and permissible for the last 5 years, right? And that has not been a threat or a significant risk. In fact, it hasn't been utilized maybe to the full extent, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be. I think if I'm being blunt, it feels a little nitpicky just to keep it R1 when it's 3 letters versus a letter and a number, but it's the same purposes that it's serving.
Mike, did you have something to add?
I'm going to tend to go along with Councilmember Raymond and Garcia, and I'm looking at the language itself. The LDR, Low Density Residential Zone District, is intended primarily for single detached dwelling units. And detached accessory dwelling units. So I believe we have the exact same language that we have in R1. You're just changing the letters. I'm really having a hard time understanding where the angst is, because the intent, and I appreciated what the mayor said last week, low density is low density. Medium density is medium density, and high density is high density. So R1, low density, that was the intent of the R1. This is following through with that. You're just changing the letters. We're not changing the ordinance. The attached dwelling units were part of the R1 and have been for a good long time. And if I might address that point, I was here 5 years ago, and the biggest reason being was because of those of us with a little bit more senior age wanting to live in place. The thought there is that either the seniors or the younger could live in the main house, and subsequently the other half of that mix would still be on that same property, still be able to be cared for by the people, their loved ones, and still be able to live in their neighborhood. That was the 100% intent for that.
Yes, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the existing language said intended primarily for single-family detached dwelling units and attached ADUs. That's what I'm reading here, existing, intended primarily for single detached dwelling units and also for attached ADUs. That was the amendments, that was the previous. So, but in the previous portion, it was intended for single family. R1 was intended for single family, but we added 5 years ago ADUs just for what you stated. It wasn't intended to make it multiple residents on a property. Legal.com mentions a number of definitions of low density, and it could be up to 5 units per acre. And is this mission creep? Is this going to eventually be mission creep to where we're going to start asking people to change the zoning once more because they know that low density is intended to be more than just maybe one family, single family home?
Actually, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that what you're suggesting is actually changing the zoning of existing property owners. There are property owners in this community that purchased their properties with the expectation that they were going to be able to put a detached accessory dwelling unit on that property. There are two, as Councilwoman Raymond said, there are 2 under construction right now. We have no idea how many other people who've purchased property in the city did it with that in mind and have plans to do that may not have made it to City Hall yet. And so from that perspective, I'm concerned about that portion of the amendment. And I agree with Councilwoman Arensource completely. Words matter. Words make a difference. Words are very important, and I do think that low-density residential is an accurate representation not only of what's in the UDO, but actually what existed prior to the UDO, what exists today before the UDO. Because in the R1, you could have up to two non-related borders. We allow up to 4 unrelated people. And Ron, you may need to correct me on this, but I believe we allow up to 4 unrelated people together in a home for a college student, for instance, in R1. So to say that it's only single-family residential, for someone to believe that it's only single-family residential, is not correct. R1 does not stand for single-family residential, the same way that R2 does not stand for duplexes, and R3 does not apply for triplexes. And we had this discussion before in regard to commercial and industrial. We've got R1 and R2 and R3. We've got C1, C2, C3. Those numbers do not correspond to the number of units or the number of people or the number of unrelated people that are allowed to live in any particular place. But the naming scheme that was put in place and proposed by the Planning Commission is actually much more representative of what's going on in that particular zoning district. It's much more accurate.
And I think, I understand where you're coming from, but seriously, the residential area, R1, was designated single-family units up until the point that it was amended to put or allow detached ADUs. And now that's the argument you're having for why to leave it or go to LDR. What I'm suggesting is that wasn't R1 was, and there's only a certain number of properties that can have, in R1, that can have a detached ADU, because the lot size limits that.
Mm-hmm.
And those are limited in the city. So there's not that many places where you can do it to begin with. And we've been told by the commission of that. So I've stated my argument, I made the motion, I'm hoping that, we get support, but if we don't, then it is what it is.
Any other discussion?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I thought I made a copy, but I don't have it here. Looking over the master plan on the housing section, it seemed to me to indicate that this was a single family, and of course, family is defined differently. Now, it doesn't have to be a mom and a dad and 2 kids, 2.5 kids. But it seemed to indicate an R1 kind of situation. So I just want to make sure that we're following our vision from 2017.
Yeah. Yes, Lynn?
The master plan also indicates that the people in the community were interested in having increased density, and I would be, we're already backing off on some of the recommendations that the Planning Commission made, and I would be very disappointed to see that we would be backing even farther away from opportunities that we've already provided. And we may see that people will take advantage of attached accessory dwelling units, but I feel like the LDR better, the language better represents what exists now. And I don't want to back off on it and create
Sure.
something new.
And we don't want to argue either. There will be increased density as we look at this plan in the north downtown area and other areas, so.
I just want to make sure both of you are leaning into your mics, because I'm not sure
sorry.
people at home are going to
Sorry.
be able to hear you. Any other discussion or comments in regard to the amendment that is currently on the floor? Mr. Hoekstra, are you leaning in?
I'm ready to vote.
You ready to vote? All right. Brenda, would you please call the roll on the amendment?
Corbin,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
No.
Raymond,
No.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters.
No.
Garcia,
No.
Trethewey,
No.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
and Mayor Box.
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. All right. And we are back to a singularly amended motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on that amended motion, or is there anyone who would like to make an additional amendment to the motion?
This is the LDR one.
So it is we currently have a motion to accept the proposal of the Planning Commission with the amendment to remove from the UDO eligibility for properties 10,000 square feet or greater to have owner-occupied attached accessory dwelling units or 2-unit conversions. Mr. Corbin.
Just one question. Regarding the LDR intent change, it says for non-residential uses in that part of that paragraph. What we mean by that is childcare and churches, things of that nature, right, that are also permitted within that area. Okay, just for the audience, there were some questions
Okay.
regarding, I want to make sure we clarify what we mean by non-residential uses.
Yeah, and those uses are currently allowed under the zoning ordinance prior to UDO.
Correct,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other motions or amendments that council members would like to make? Mr. Trethewey?
I will make to move things along here, if we're done with the LDR, which I think we are, make a motion to adopt the recommendation of staff for the TNR, leaving the multifamily unit eligibility the same as it currently is at the 4,800 square feet of lot area per unit and 60 foot of frontage.
Support?
Moved by Trethewey, supported by Corbin. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend in regard to TNR? And I'm assuming that amendment includes the entire recommended language from city staff in regard to those changes?
It does.
It does. Mr. Corbin, correct? Yes. All right. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none. Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters. Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Aaronshorst.
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
and Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Now we have a motion that has been amended 2 different times, one in regard to TNR, one in regard to LDR. Are there any other amendments that council members would like to make in regard to the motion that is currently on the floor as amended?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make
You go
Like
ahead,
to-
Mr. Trethewey.
like to make an amendment to the Fndt. I hate all these letters. Parking change to 1.2 spaces per unit to get it on the table for discussion.
All right, and just for clarification purposes, both for you and for the members of the public, FNDT stands for Form-Based Code and the North Downtown District. And for the people who may be wondering where that is, that runs from 6th Street to the north between approximately Freedom Village and Lake Macatawa.
Correct.
Correct. So we have a motion on the floor for amending the FNDT parking to change it from 1 space per unit to 1.2 spaces minimum required per unit. Is there support for that motion?
Support.
Support by Garcia. Is there any discussion in regard to the motion? The motion to amend the doubly amended already motion. Seeing, yes, go ahead, Ms. Raymond, and then Scott, we'll get to you too.
Sure, I'm opposed to increasing the parking minimum in the north downtown area. Increasing parking minimums adds cost to housing, residential development in particular. I think we have a great opportunity in the north downtown to do something different. And while 0.2 doesn't seem like very much, any little bit adds to the cost of development. And I would like to see us be creative in the north downtown. For me, this is a compromise. 1 parking minimum is a compromise. 1 parking minimum is a compromise. I'd like to get rid of minimums altogether. So I'm willing to stick with the one parking space minimum per unit. But I would hope that we could have a more interesting vision for the north downtown and not add parking to that area. More parking to that area.
Mr. Corbin?
So I just want to make sure we clarify for the public that's listening and in the audience that this is not impacting the R1/LDR going forward. This is that area you're speaking of.
Very
Or-
particular part
Yes.
of the downtown area, not even including the downtown as people may know it
Yeah.
at this point.
And I'm in favor of this, and I think the compromise is the 1.2, because we probably should be at 1.5, but I think it's important that not to increase the cost, but we are having a parking issue downtown. We have traditionally had parking issues downtown, and we need to make sure that where we support our businesses and the current residents that live in that area, that we should have some effort to require building of these newer facilities or remodeling these facilities to have this parking available. So I appreciate your comment, and I understand it. We've talked about this on many occasions, but I will support the 1.2.
Lynn?
Yeah, just to follow up, all of the developments that are going up downtown currently are providing two spaces for each unit. This is not limiting developers in any way. This is a minimum. Developers can provide whatever they want, and they do, and they provide what they feel is appropriate. So they don't need our help in that particular area, and this would allow for a different variety of housing, hopefully, in that part of the city.
Mike?
Lynn and I are going to differ greatly on this one. We've already had the discussion. I appreciate where you're coming from. I know where your heart is and where your passion is, but I also know where the money comes from as far as developers. Our job up here and my responsibility is to minimize the impact on the citizens of Holland as far as their tax base and where that money goes. As you just stated, the developments that are going down there have been on their own volition offering 2 spots. I truly believe that developers should at least offer 2 spots. So the 1.2 is far below my expectations. The 1.2 is far below the recommendation from the DDA. That was 1.5. It should be the responsibility of the people developing it to afford property on their, afford the parking area on their property to contain what's in their building. Because if that doesn't happen, and we hear from the DDA, we hear from the PSD all the time, where customers can't park there because residents are there. And if you're a resident, you constantly have to move your car back and forth, and it just doesn't happen. The biggest thing is enforcement. We don't have the money, we haven't had the discussion to put the meter maids back up. The people paying right now for the parking in the general downtown are the merchants. If it gets out in this area, it's going to be the general public. And I don't want to put somebody making some pretty decent bucks off of some of that high density that we're talking about over there, putting the parking problems on the back of the citizens of Holland.
Well, enforcement, I'm glad you brought up enforcement, because it seems to me, and the presentations that they've made to the Planning Commission, they have not made the case to the Planning Commission. 3 times they presented, 3 times we were unanimous in keeping it at 1 parking space minimum. They didn't make the case that we had a concern that there was a need for parking downtown. And enforcement, they did say enforcement is an issue. And so I'm reluctant, more than just reluctant, to ignore the fact that we need to increase enforcement and increase the parking minimum to make up for it. I think we as a council need to figure out how to help them enforce the parking that already exists downtown, the parking rules that already exist downtown.
But why should we, I hope you indulge this
I'm
little bit of
I'm completely
back and forth.
indulgent in this, yes.
So stay here, Lane.
Yeah.
Again, I have a problem with us having to put up public parking for people in a private residence to be parking in.
We also don't have to do that. I mean, I think that
Where else are they gonna park? I'm sorry.
Well, that was the other thing that we talked about, was we can limit the percentage of parking spaces that are allowed by residential developments. We can do that.
And where are the people gonna go?
We've been working with 1 parking space minimum for a very, very long time. And people will find a place to people have parking. People down to the developers are providing 2 spaces when they need to. I'm going back to this, if they want to provide 2 spaces, and we can limit the number of spaces that we allow for them to, because I know that there was a project that was quite large that asked for 20 additional spaces downtown, and we can limit that.
Well, I just go back to, this is probably the 3rd or 4th summer now. It's still, I still shudder about it, but street parking. We had to have it because people don't have just 1 car like they did in the olden days. They got 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and they've got to have some place to park. They can't park in their own driveway. The same, what's the difference? We're allowing it to happen a little bit downtown on public streets. Luckily, we had the wherewithal to not have that happen during leaf and snow pickup. But any additional parking that we put down there on the backs of the public that have to do that, you have the upkeep, you have the snowplow, you have a number of other issues that the general city has to supplement somebody that's got a 12-story building down there.
We don't have to supplement it. This on-street parking, I think, it doesn't work as an argument for me, because they can only park on street half a year. So they have to find a place to park during the other half a year. So if the on-street parking was all year round, I would buy that argument.
Well, luckily, we had wherewithal not to have that happen because of everything else that happens in
So
the city.
people clearly find a place to park their car if they have more than one car in their driveways.
We will agree to disagree. Thank you very much for the dialogue.
Are we done?
I'm done with this discussion.
Sure, Mike, okay.
Anyone else have any comments in regard to the motion on the floor to amend the proposal to change the FNDT parking from 1.0 spaces to 1.2 spaces per unit?
Can I make just one quick comment?
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
I'm tending to, Brother Mike, I hear what you're saying, and I believe that you're speaking from how you see reality, and that's probably very true. But I'm tending to go along with Lynn on this. First of all, the reality is, as she is so well described, anyone who's building a development in the downtown area and knows the group that they're trying to get to move in there, and if they know that they are probably going to have more than one vehicle, they're going to build their project to accommodate that. We've seen that. I think that's the way it's going to go. That reality dictates the design. I'm pretty confident of that. And if they don't, and they come to us and say, hey, we need 50 more parking spots, we can always say, you should have thought of that when you built the building. It's rather rude, but that's a reality too. The other thing that I think people, I don't know if we don't realize this as much or not, but we're talking about urban living. If I'm living in, a township and I've got my garage and I can put 3 or 4 cars there and a boat and my camper and some other stuff too, and I would really love to enjoy the downtown experience. And my expectation is that I'm going to be able to do that under the same circumstances that I enjoyed when I lived, where I had lots of room around me, where I could have more than one car. I think I would have to readjust my expectations. Urban living has different parameters. It's just a different thing. Maybe you can't have 2 cars, or maybe if you have to, you got to pay extra to have the space. That's just, in my mind anyway, part of the reality of living in a much higher density area like downtown. So maintaining a minimum of 1 space seems prudent to me, and I think the market will address any additional needs beyond that. I could be wrong, but that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Yeah, Nikki.
I would say that would be true if we lived in a truly urban area and we had mass transportation and all that, but it's tough. We will be moving toward that, and it will take, maybe this is a baby step, but I think you need at least 1 spot. No spots here in this area where it's dense downtown, and then you want to go, I don't know, to a skating rink on the other side of town. You can't get there.
Just to be clear, we're not talking about 0 versus 1 or 1.2. We're talking about 1 versus 1.2. Okay, just want to make sure you were clear on that. All right. Any other comments in regard to this particular motion to amend? Yes, Raul.
Yeah, I mean, I think I resonate with each of the comments around the table so far, and because of that, I think the 1.2 is a compromise. Sitting with the DDA and the PSD, and hearing about some of the discussions there around parking, and ultimately the recommendation that they came with a lot of support from the downtown merchants at a higher requirement that they were asking for. Now, this is quite a bit lower than that, but I'm also aware, right, that this kind of requirement is going to impact most, or more than anyone else, the affordable projects, right? Affordable housing, those that are trying to create spaces for people who make, minimum income to live in a space like downtown, right? That is connected to a lot of, spaces and essential resources that they're going to need. But the 1.2, I think part of the reason that we named 1.2 instead of a 1.25, or the recommended 1.5 and then 1.75 and then the 2.0, right? There were a few numbers out there. 1.2 was because that's kind of the bank standard, right? There's kind of that required already minimum if you're going to get some of this money. So they've kind of done some of that study and research, and it feels like 1.2 to me is the compromise.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I think, Mike, did you have a comment to make? And then Lynn, we'll go to you.
Well, first of all, Nikki, I'll make sure that the Max board does not hear your comment about no mass transit around here. Yeah. The second thing being is there was a question, and I've heard a lot. There was some discussion on the radio today about 1.2. The reason you go with a fraction of, because you have visitors that are coming in. You want to have the minimum, but you know that this apartment probably is not going to have any. This guy may have 2 or 3, so you put a little bit over the 1 so that you make sure that you have that buffer in there, especially for the on-site parking. So that's why we go with the fraction. Yes, there is not a 0.2 of a car, and well, some of the little ones may. Yeah, we won't go down that road. But anyway, I hope that helps. Just a little bit of an explanation.
Lynn?
I just wanted to address what Raul said about the bank financing. Mayor brought that up a couple of weeks ago and had also mentioned that it had been lowered already once. So I think making our decision based on what the bank is deciding to finance really isn't, I think, a great way to go. I think we need to make a decision based on what we think we need in the community, because the bank could tomorrow say none and go for it. So.
Yeah, Raul.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's the sole purpose. I think it's that defined or identified a number, a figure, because there was other factors kind of involved. But otherwise, the recommendation, again, kind of what we were encouraged was 1.5, based on the need that the DDA is experiencing, or that they are communicating, is the case. And so 1.2 is definitely lower than that, but it's not the one that we've been requiring for that area.
Any other comments? Seeing none. Brenda, would you please call the roll in regard to this motion to amend the primary motion?
Raymond.
No.
Byrd.
Yes.
Peters.
No.
Garcia.
Yes.
Trethewey.
Yes.
Aaronshorst.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
No.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we have a thrice amended motion. Is there any discussion on the primary motion, or any additional amendments that anyone would like to make to the motion that is on the floor? And I would actually encourage the latter rather than the former. I regretted saying it as soon as the words came out of my mouth. Does anyone want to make an additional amendment? We're good with amendments, because if we're good with amendments, I'm going to open up the floor for the public hearing. We're all good with that?
All good.
All right. I'm now going to open the public hearing. Again, we have the 5-minute rule, and as I have said twice before to this same gentleman, would you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm actually kind of being attacked online by the government of Rwanda, which is a really weird thing to say here, but I don't care. My name is Joe Spalding. I live at 307 Riley Street on the north side. And I'm not going to be short this time. I want to first take a moment to recognize and acknowledge that all of us in this room are occupying stolen Anishinaabe Ottawa land. That is a fact. And some people are going to think that's some sort of hippy-dippy nonsense, or it's silly, but it's not. That's the story of land use in our community, and that's where it begins. I'm going to go into some history now. Explicit housing segregation around, like, it exists, like, there around these racist lines for most of American history. Homes in this area that were built prior to 1967 were very often you'll find deed restrictions that prevent brown or black people from being able to live there. They say non-white residents, sometimes they say non-Christian residents are not able to live there. They still exist on these deeds all the time. In 1967, the United States passed the Fair Housing Act, making explicit segregation illegal. But starting in Berkeley, California, zoning was used to make sure the existing housing stock and the existing segregation was locked in. Segregating housing, it's not like segregating a school. Integration cannot happen faster than people moving into homes, and that can't happen until homes are either built or vacated by current occupants. Exclusionary zoning was passed explicitly with that intent. And it's on the record. In Berkeley, the language they used, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to swear, but the language they used to pass those original zoning laws that we mimicked were they wanted to keep black and Asiatics out of white neighborhoods. And it absolutely worked. If you look at the no-loan zone maps, we call those redlining maps in most cities, you'll see that the residual segregation of neighborhoods exists to this day. But it's not merely about systemically racist zoning laws, because whatever their intent today, they're the main drivers of economic segregation across the country in every single community. My parents moved here to start a business. It was called Someplace Else originally. It's a pizza place. It doesn't exist anymore. There used to be a second one downtown. They later changed the name to Jono's Pizza. They had amazing breadsticks. They could not have done that. They could not have established roots in this community had they not had a duplex on the north side they could afford to move into in the early 80s, mid-80s. That duplex is currently illegal to build where it is, by the way. In the neighborhood it is. If they tore it down, they'd have to put a single-family home in that lot. It's too small. More than 55% of Americans are renters. Less than 35% of Hollanders are renters. 4 years ago, the city made an arbitrary aim to limit the percentage of renters on this block. I think they were talking about 30%. It's unconscionable either way. Rent will continue to skyrocket until the rental vacancy rate is over 9%. That's a fact. Rent will continue to skyrocket, homelessness will continue to increase, and we'll continue building farther and farther out into farmland until we have that rental housing stock. More housing isn't the only way to address this, and I heard we talked about 4. We had a six non-family member related rule before. Now we have a 4. That 4 non-housing or non-related people in one house is very interesting to me. Does anyone, no, it's a rhetorical question, but does anyone know why there's no good bands that come out of Denver, Colorado? It's because they don't allow more than one they haven't until recently allowed more than one non-related person to live in the same household. They've essentially banned roommates in most of their city. And it has had an effect. The only band that I can think of off the top of my head is the Flowbots, and they're a duo. And I understand that doesn't mean a lot to folks here, but I mean, culture is important and music is part of culture. We all know that the process is bad in this room, in this meeting. I'm saying that more aware than anyone, and I know that this is one of the most functional city councils in the country. I'm still saying that. I was just at the Curragh before this, and there are more renters there are more young people there are more people of color. We know what voices are being excluded from this conversation because of the necessity of when it is and because the working class has to work. Landlords are a little bit more lucky in that regard. I own a condo on the north side. It's doubled in value over the last 2 years due to housing scarcity. Meanwhile, my best friend cannot afford to buy, and he might have to move. A house in this community going up that fast due to scarcity in value, it's obscene. It is absolutely obscene. I don't need that ROI in 2 years at 37. I need that ROI maybe in 20 years if I'm lucky. Those who publicly fight to maintain these conditions make it more difficult for my lifetime friends to stay in my
Mr.
community.
Mayor, that is 5 minutes.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Michael Short. I live at 810 Myrtle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, esteemed council members, and I was expecting the city manager, so thank the city manager as well. I want to sincerely thank you for the many considerations you've taken during the development and approval process of the proposed UDO. I want to thank you for the proposed revisions that are being considered for the LDR and the TNR zones. And I want to encourage you to approve the UDO with the proposed amendments. Reducing the proposed densification in response to citizen concerns is welcome indeed. Many people are pleased that these changes are likely to be approved, and I'm included in that group. But I do want to respectfully ask you to please consider and discuss and debate 4 more concerns or questions as you go through the approval process tonight. Most of you received my email earlier in the day, but I want to read them to you, okay? They were also entered into public comment. So, number 1, is the absence of a requirement for owner occupancy in the TNR zone advisable? Investors seeking higher profits, such as hedge funds, for example, BlackRock and Blackstone hedge funds, are buying up whole properties and entering into for rental market. This could happen in Holland. My number 2 question is, are multi-unit conversions a necessity in the TNR? Of the 2,406 properties in the TNR, 171 are eligible for 2-unit conversions, 31 are eligible for 3-unit conversions, and 15 are eligible for 4-unit conversions. That's the 60-foot width. So as the amendment states, that takes into account the 60-foot width. That's a total of 217 single-family homes. If all of the eligible properties were converted and rented and not by an owner, then that would be 495 new rental dwelling units, with a loss of the 217 single-family homes. If all of the units were converted, then the percentage of single-family homes across Holland would decrease from its present 60% to 57%. Okay, so there would be a drop below what is a threshold for many communities deciding whether or not they've gotten to that point where they have to turn back and move on up and increase the number of single-family homes. Number 3rd concern, in the proposed UTO is the absence of a requirement to notify property owners in the TNR zone within 300 feet of the applicant's property where conversion of a dwelling will take place. Is this in accordance with the requirements of the Zoning Enabling Act, that's P8 110 of 2006? Notifications will not be required. Number 4, why has the UDO removed the requirement that conversions in the TNR be approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals, as was stated in the current applicable code 39-282, which was approved as Ordinance 1415 in 2005. We've talked about many things that have been in the past. You've heard attached dwelling units, you've heard conversions, you've heard parking. Well, what about the Zoning Board of Appeals who approved conversions back then? Have we gone and thrown that away? In the proposed UDO, the zoning administrator has been granted approval authority for conversion applications in the TNR zone. In the proposed UDO, the Zoning Board of Appeals process will take place for a conversion. That was earlier in the day. I read through the current that's online. LDR is off the table. TNR, you can't go to Zoning Board of Appeals if you want conversions. So consider a developer who wants to buy property. They go through the zoning administrator in their application process. The zoning administrator says, yes, go ahead. The homeowner who's within 300 feet finds out on day construction that
Mr.
They've
Mayor,
got a
that's 5
conversion
minutes.
going.
Thank you. Your
next to
time has
them.
expired, Mr. Short.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Doug Buma, 1385 Heather Drive. 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that we used to live 2 doors down, and then we moved into our current house. We've been in our current neighborhood for 31 years, and our neighborhood is all single-family homes. That's what it is. It's what it was 30 years ago. It still is what it is today. I'm going to ramble here a little bit. First off, we without question, we have a shortage of single-family homes in this area. We have a shortage of single-family homes in the country. That's number one. Number two, we have a shortage of rental properties in this area and in the country. Okay, they are dueling. In some senses, they're dueling interests. Okay. I would hope that we won't compromise one to get to the other, or vice versa. As a homeowner, I am concerned with some of the proposed changes in that this neighborhood that we live in today that is all single-family homes could change, and it could be a mix. I have been in plenty of cities where the zoning feels haphazard. And quite frankly, that's one of the concerns that Kathy and I had as homeowners. It was like, well, okay, what if a bunch of the homes on our street change or get added to, and suddenly the character of the whole street or neighborhood changes? So that's a concern. But I just hope that we can be sensitive to what has been there, because we Nikki, to what you said, we bought our house looking at the neighborhood. We have some neighbors down the street who moved in 2 years ago, and they bought because of the neighborhood and the homes that were there. They're concerned about this proposed change. So anyway, I just want you to keep that in mind. I know you guys are thinking about that. One last thing, I would love it if you guys could re-articulate. I believe what you guys have adopted are the 3 recommendations that we see on the screen. I would like to hear that in the affirmative, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I missed the second one, the LDR amendment that was proposed. I didn't hear that clearly, and maybe it was just me. Okay? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And yes, I am going to ask you to state your name and address for the record.
Fine. My name is Brooke Anderson. I live at 97 West 14th Street. Dear elected officials, I come before you as a mother, a social worker, a resident of the downtown neighborhoods, specifically the Historic District, and as a volunteer on city commissions for the last 11 years. I have lived in every neighborhood of this fine city over the last 33 years, having rented a duplex on the south side 11 years with my single mom who worked at Prince Corporation, and owning a home in the Holland Heights neighborhood, then had a small stint of time in Grand Rapids in Santa Monica, California. Then as an adult in the downtown neighborhoods with my family. A few major points to be concise and not to waste your time. Those opposed to the UDO make up a tiny percentage of the residents of this fine city. Please remember that. The UDO is an update of an 80-year-old document. The Planning Commission, with the guidance of the experts in city planning and best practices, post-redlining and discriminatory housing, have literally combed through every single piece of the current city ordinance over the last 3 years. I remind you that the term conversion is a legal term and a planning term. It is not being used to hide or sneak something into the UDO. A conversion of a structure from a 1-family to a 2-family on a lot over 10,000 square feet is perfectly doable and does not harm the character of a neighborhood. I live on 14th Street, and if you drove down the street, I'm not sure you would even know which homes are 2-family rentals, let alone a rental, versus owner-occupied, as I also had no clue until I got to know my neighbors. It's amazing to me how there are residents in this city that feel that rentals are the soul of the problem in the neighborhoods. There are so many good landowners who take great care of the properties, but there are just as many homeowners who take good and bad care of their home that they own and live in. A single-family home does not mean one house, necessarily, or one household living in that house. And a large house with 2 units provides 2 single-family housing opportunities on the same lot. Haven't we been talking about how low our stock is in the city? Conversions keep the footprint of a home the same while providing more housing. So in fact, it does not change the facade of the neighborhood. Also, a single residence home could have 4 drivers in it with a family of 6. Someday my family could have 4 cars in the driveway with myself and my 4 kids. We have a 10,000 square foot lot. We could convert our home and have a family of 3 upstairs and a family of 2 downstairs. That is smaller than my current family. And the units combined, upstairs and downstairs, could have a less number of cars than I could have with my family of 6. Which makes the argument of increased traffic with this issue moot. R1 does not mean 1 family in a home. LDR means the same thing as R1, single detached dwelling unit. It does not guarantee that 1 family is going to live in that dwelling unit. A detached ADU is an improvement to our zoning ordinance, allowing a landowner to either create a supplemental income or move into a smaller unit and stay in their neighborhood. Myself and my family would seriously put a detached ADU above our garage someday, but we cannot feasibly do that for at least 10 to 15 years. So please do not take that detached ADU part out of this. I remind you that anyone can make their home into a rental today. This can happen without the UDO. The ability to control what our neighbors do with their property ends at our own property line. If we want control over what our neighbor does with their property, we can buy it. A single-family home does not mean just 1 house. I've said that before. A large house with 2 units provides 2 single-family housing opportunities on the same lot. Talking about parking in the north downtown, please keep it at 1. There is no good reason we need to change that number. To encourage walking to work, to keep the cost of units down, to keep the number of cars to a minimum, it's imperative to keep the number down. We have no parking issues downtown. I see people park at the Civic Center and have no problem getting a spot, then walk to the shops and restaurants. Creating an increased minimum in parking makes the cost of the housing in that development increase. The units for sale in the development going in.
Mr. Mayor, that's 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry your time has expired. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, please come forward. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm Linda Falstad, and I live at 152 Birchwood in Holland. So I want to thank you, first of all, and the staff and all the volunteers, Brooke and the Planning Commission, because I know a lot of hours were put in to, update our zoning ordinance with this new UDO. So kudos to you and thank you. But I do want to read what I'd written. I know you've passed your amendments, but I just want to share this with you. Mayor Box and City Council members, I'm pleased with the outcome of the master plan for the City of Holland, as I was part of that process. The guiding principles of this master plan, and this is a quote, inviting all to enjoy a thriving and resilient Holland. That's what we all want. Land use is governed locally by zoning. Holland has traditionally used functional zoning such as residential, commercial, or industrial. Now suddenly our city planners want to blanket the city with intensity zoning such as high, medium, or low density. And that may eventually happen, it sounds like. I'm sure I don't know everyone's story about how they arrived in Holland, where they came from, why they're here. What I do know is that we learn from each other. And we all look forward to the future. We all love our families. And we love our homes, whether they're rented or owned. My husband and I bought our house in Holland Heights in 1981, so you know how long I've lived there now, a long time. Our home at that time was our biggest investment, but not just financially, it was our investment in our community because that's what our home is, and that's why we chose our neighborhood. I live in a starter home neighborhood. Most of the homes have one-stall garages and are 3 bedrooms with 1 bath, and I love my neighborhood. I want to just comment on the proposed zoning changes that were being proposed. The changes to R1 residential and TNR to allow for multifamily rentals is based on economics. The more units, the more tax dollars for the city of Holland. How will this develop housing which is creative and inviting? We're looking at intensity zoning. I know many a renter who's afraid to complain for fear of being evicted. How will we ensure accountability of landlords when our current rental inspection program fails to do so? So, as my letter closes, I am asking for your consideration in leaving the TNR and the R1 neighborhoods, or LDR, as they were created and as I invested in. Allowing for families in need of single-family homes for the opportunity to live here in Holland. I heard at a meeting, and I believe it was a planning commission meeting, if not city council, that the city of Holland's greatest need is for single-family homes. I'm going to end with a quote from curb.com, and it says, "Today's housing crisis is the result of decades of policy decisions at the local, state, and federal levels on land use, transportation, taxes, and labor. It's bigger than zoning." Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Yes, please come forward. And would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, I'm Evan Manicky, 714 Columbia, and it's hard to follow people who clearly know what they're talking about and can speak to all of the alphabet soup of LDR and TNR and Fndt parking. I apologize for being uninformed, and you may take my comments as just impressions, which is exactly what I want them to be. Like many residents, citizens of this community, I have impressions of what's going on, maybe based on inaccuracies, maybe based on false assumptions and lack of understanding. It seems to me that you've made a lot of decisions and are moving forward, and I may not be able to influence them at all, but I'd like to read a short comment. And if I've had things wrong in this statement, I apologize, but the impression is what I want you to have, is the feeling of a citizen. I'm glad for the opportunity for citizen input. Residents always want to feel that they have a say in how they're governed and how regulations are developed. I want to speak about exemptions, exceptions, and variances, and I learned a new term today. No one's going to help me because it's the dialogue then, but it's a variance, right? It's a non-conforming. There we go. I want to speak about them. There's very little in life that's total, complete, uniform, and consistent. There's always a circumstance that warrants special treatment or a unique approach. And that's why I think there's things called zoning appeal boards, and relief is applied for from rules that may need to be shifted a bit to accommodate an unusual need. A blanket approach, I think that's what UDO is my opinion, trying to solve the need for an occasional exception with a one-size-fits-all rule that allows for the exception to be acceptable as an a priori standard. Imagine that the proposal does not pass, and there's a single-family home with a large lot that for valid and urgent reasons would like to vary from the rules in place for single-family residences. A division for 2 families, an addition, attached, detached, or even some rental use as seen as productive or good for the neighborhood and community is proposed. I submit that well-intentioned zoning board members and others could devise a way that an exception could be made and the permission granted. However, to make vast areas of the city pre-approved, pre-exempted, pre-okayed, pre-allowed, and universally accepted to function no longer as a single-family home, but as the homeowner decides is in his best interest, without regard for the impact of his neighbors, it seems to me be, well, not neighborly at all. As for the designation R1, I think it's conventional. I don't think LDR is. I think it's not. I think low-density residential is, it seems to me, a political statement of intent. And though backed by some, it has an agenda embedded in it and calls for a political side to be taken. Voting is, at election time, an intensely political moment and the right time to select those with whom we agree and to stand for a belief system and for change. The designation of residential zones does not seem the appropriate venue for political agendas. Although I clearly have an agenda, I would like to see this not go forward. I urge council to keep what is as is. No one wants regrets from unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and address?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Jay Wortley. I live at 311 West 12th Street. I just want to thank you all for the hard work you have put into the UDO. I want to thank you for the amendments that you have adopted so far. I want to thank you for the time I had to meet with several of you to talk about this. I want to thank you for listening and hearing, no matter which way, what your views are. I appreciate the time that you spent with me and listened. I appreciate that very much. I do want to just brief comment on R1 versus LDR. I support keeping R1 as the name. I think names are important, and I support keeping the R1 single-family residential zone as the name, not the low-density residential zone. If the significant zoning changes are removed, which they have been through the amendments, then I see no need to change the name. People are familiar with the name R1, know what it means, know what it stands for. Changing the name to low-density residential, in my opinion, only puts a target on this zone for density increasing zoning changes in the future by future city councils. So I would urge you to preserve the name R1, which has served well these many years. And again, thank you so much for all your work on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, would you please state your name and address for the record?
I will indeed. Jenna Ellswick, 889 West 25th Street. Good evening, council. I'm happy to be here. My last hurrah, really, here with you. I bid you farewell. With all of this, concentration and focus on these three items, I want to really just remind council and remind the community, especially, about everything that UDO is. This is the Unified Development Ordinance. This is going well beyond these three items. This is a document that will guide the City of Holland in the future, that will help the City of Holland meet its resiliency, sustainability, and adaptation needs for the future. There's an article that's all about landscaping and green infrastructure, really promoting very progressive ideals and progressive ways in order to balance the built environment with the natural environment, which is something that's extremely important in any community, and certainly has been the leading light and focus of the Planning Commission, and certainly of myself and staff and our consultant over the last 3 years. In addition to that, there's new zone districts that are being proposed that are really focusing on increasing minimal density, but specifically in our employment areas, in the business areas, in order to enhance the ability for mixed use, which is also something that is going to meet our resiliency and our sustainability needs in the future. I've mentioned before that this UDO is really a pioneer document. I expect that at least our consultant, Chris Corey, and hopefully supported by CNS department upstairs, will apply for some awards for this document. This is truly a cutting-edge planning document that I hope that the entire community is aware of and can be proud of. Yes, there's been dissension. Yes, there's been, all of these hot topic area concentration. But I'm sad because I feel like what's really great about Udo, all of the amazing things that Udo is promoting has not been thoroughly discussed and has not been, especially with the community, because I hear it time and time again. Udo is being referenced specifically just for these hot topic areas. And again, I want to just say, please take a chance to look at the Udo, to look at hollandudo.com and see for yourself all of the great things that this document is really offering the city. And how other communities, similar in size and characteristics to the city of Holland, will follow, will emulate the city of Holland, which is something to be very proud of, not only for council, which I know that you are, but also for the community as a whole. I do, however, want to just interject that unfortunately my husband and I have made the decision to leave this community. And in part, it's seeking a different employment opportunity, going into the private sector, being able to guide more communities through these types of processes and transportation and other sustainable issues. But it's also because we've realized that this is not the community where I want to raise my child. And a lot of that is because of these issues that have been raised. It's not where I feel that I would belong. And I'm warning you that, you hear a lot from one demographic of the population. You have not heard very much from the younger population, but I do promise you that if you're not looking forward to those needs as well, that other people will be
Mr.
leaving
Mayor,
the
that is the 5
community.
minutes of public
I'm sorry, your
Thank
time
you.
has expired. Thank you, Jenna. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Yes, please come forward.
I will state my name and address.
Thank you.
David Field, 759 South Shore. And I'm not really sure where to start my comments. I tend to agree with the prior speaker that we've somehow launched on a planning process that the good news is has generated a tremendous amount of public interest, and it has. The bad news is, in my mind, is I don't think any of us have any idea where we're going with this or what we're trying to do with it, and are quite fearful of what the potential outcomes could be. When we did some communications with some of you, the question came up, where has this been done before? Where could we benchmark off someone else doing this? And the examples were given, Seattle and Minneapolis. And I'm trying to say, how does that connect to Holland, Michigan? Are we in an urban setting here? Are we trying to create an urban setting for some philosophical reason? And I don't know that I view this community of whatever thousand, that it's in an urban setting. Quite to the contrary, I think people come here because what it is and what it's been. When I look at some of these elements and all this terminology that's foreign to all of us, from a functional zoning standpoint, it's totally confusing. I am terribly disappointed in the fact that the Planning Commission, with all of the opposition, came out 9-0 in favor of the planning document. And I'm thinking somebody's not listening to all the objections to it and all the confusions to it. And I don't disagree that there probably was great value that hasn't even surfaced yet. I would almost submit to you that we need to step back First of all, define the problem we're trying to solve. We've got this package that we still are all confused about. And I have spent quite a bit of time and had quite a few communications with some of you since December, and I still don't totally understand where we're trying to go with this. It was done in the Planning Commission or in the Planning Council. We are all terribly busy doing other things in life and maybe not connected enough as we should be. But I listened tonight of us just trying to figure out how to modify something that most of us don't understand. So I would submit to you, it's really, rather than coming out with something kind of half-baked, why don't we step back for a minute, look at this thing in total, get a broader base picture in people's mind as to what is here, and then make some decisions. Because again, I'm not sure what problem we're trying to solve with all this. I admire all the work that's gone into it. The only thing I can relate to it, and I don't mean to be offensive with this, and it's not intending to be, but in my corporate life, I've sat through many of Boston Consulting Group ideas and Anderson Accounting ideas that we embodied in a corporation that set us back terribly. Somebody's new idea about something, so let's go do it. And we bought into it and had tremendously bad results. That only cost us money. Now we're tampering with this community, and we're tampering with the community going forward. And we hear all kinds of words about sustainability and so on and so forth. These are important words, but we need to have an idea where we're going. And I don't think any of us, I think we don't have to all agree, and there are opposing views, but I don't think as a community we really know the direction we're headed on. So again, I thank you for your work. I thank you for your time. I know the compensation is deep and keeps you attracted to these positions. But thank you at all. But I must tell you that I'm not totally sure what we have in front of us, and I'm terribly disappointed with all the terminology that somebody's come up with that all of us have had now to learn. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Field. Does anyone else like to address council at this time?
Yeah.
Yes, please come forward. Please don't speak until you get up to the microphone, because people are watching at home. They'd like to be able to hear you too. And we would like you to state your name and address for the record.
Wilhelmina Stakety, 100% Dutch. I will email my speech, but the sign is wrong. God zij met ons is not with an Y, it's with an IJ.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? All right. Going once, going twice. I will now close the public comment period. We have a motion on the floor that has been amended 3 times. The original motion was to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission. It was amended to remove from the TNR some changes and to leave the multifamily unit eligibility the same as it currently is at 4,800 square feet for a lot area per unit and 60 feet of frontage. Also to remove from the UDO eligibility for properties 10,000 square feet or greater in the LDR zoning district, to not allow them to have owner-occupied attached ADUs or 2-unit conversions. And the third amendment was to change the minimum parking space requirement in the form-based code North Downtown District from a minimum requirement of 1.0 spaces to 1.2 spaces per unit. Did I get that correct, Mr. Trethewey? Just double checking. All right, so we have a motion that has been amended on the floor. Discussion from council members. Yes, Mr. Byrd.
So during the public comment, there was a comment regarding, I'll just read it. It says, why has the proposed UDO removed the requirement that conversions be approved by the zoning boards of appeals as stated in the current applicable code section 39-282, which was approved as ordinance number 1415 in 2005. I guess I wasn't aware that got changed, and I guess I was wondering why.
I don't have those code references in front of me. I don't know if staff's going to be able to help or if Ron is going to be able to help in that regard.
think I'd need to defer to staff on the explanation for that because I was not involved.
Go ahead if Jenna knows.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenna.
Thanks. So actually what it is that that it wouldn't just directly go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, that it would still be noticed, the 300 feet, and that if someone requested it to go to the Board of Appeals, then they would bring it to the Board of Appeals. So the reason that it's changing is to just take out that direct bureaucracy, to try to see if less things could go to straight up to a commission. Now, and again, if someone though within the vicinity requests for it to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, then it could go to the Board of Appeals still.
Does that answer your question, Quincy?
It does. I am not, and from previous circumstances, I'm not a big fan of the 300 feet regardless. I don't think that's enough ground to be covered. So I guess I don't like how, I think there needs to be more checks and balances. And with this right here, it looks like it takes away the checks and balances. So.
In my impression, the check is, and the balance is that neighbors are notified prior. The 300 feet is a standard that we've got across the board within the zoning ordinance.
I agree with that.
And the balance is that if a neighbor doesn't like the idea of the change being made, they have the opportunity to be able to say, I'd like this to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So there is a check and a balance there.
Okay. Again, I disagree with the, I won't say, yeah, I disagree with the 300 feet. I understand it's standard, but I don't think that covers enough ground. Because if I'm at 400 feet or if I'm at 900 feet and I'm not notified, and that distance does have a direct impact on my residents. So I really would, and so those people at 300 feet have the opportunity, because they've been notified, to notify the people who are at 400 feet or 900 feet.
So are you suggesting an amendment to the UDO?
Absolutely.
I guess I just follow up with that a little bit.
Yeah.
That discussion is, all the other zones that I'm reading here on page 291 reference 600 feet. So could you clarify the difference between and why 300 versus 600?
Yes, so the 300 feet is actually in the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. So that is the legal requirement notice.
The minimal.
At minimum,
Okay.
which the city has used for 30-some years, if not more.
Right.
The 600 feet is only when there's a public workshop requirement. So in certain instances for different projects, a public workshop is required, and then that's when the private property owner who is proposing a development, they are responsible for noticing 600 feet. It's not a legal requirement like how the 300 feet is, because it's not coming directly from the city. It's coming from the developer themselves.
Thank you for clarification.
Any other comments, discussion from council? Not at all. We have a motion, we have an amended motion and a second on the floor.
This is about passing UDO itself, right?
This is about passing, this is discussion on the
Overall.
thrice amended motion to pass the entire thing, yes.
So
Yeah, let's go ahead, Scott, and then Dave, and then Nikki?
So.
No?
yeah.
Okay, Scott and then Dave.
So the one thing I am disappointed, and I shared that with everyone, is Waterfront Holland and making sure through this UDO process that there's access to the water. And I know there have been many discussions in front of the public, but there's many discussions behind closed doors, why there's limitations on the city and what we can do and what we can't do in the planning document. So I am disappointed, but I've come to the conclusion that there's not much we can do about that. So there was a number of statements talking about redlining and racism, and I find it very insulting, to be honest with you, as a board member, to suggest any of us have done that. We've listened to everyone. I've been to many of the public outreach meetings early on, a year ago, year and a half ago. Probably one of the only board member, maybe a few board members who have attended those public meetings. We did a lot of outreach, a lot of mailings went out, a lot of advertisement on our website, and we worked hard to try and bring people to the table to listen, to talk, to debate. And so I just find it somewhat insulting to suggest, that we were attempting to redline or use, some type of racism to design our planning or our plans and our housing stock here in the city of Holland. I find it kind of unusual too, some people who worked on the planning commission talking about it's not about affordability and housing, but yet that's what they spoke to at the podium this evening. And they flat and just outrightly denied that during the planning commission meetings to many people who asked the question about why we are doing this. And for some reason they felt important for them to say that tonight. And so I'm just kind of confused on that. Frankly, I don't care about awards. I frankly don't care about awards. I care about the city. I care about how we develop the city. And I care about what it looks like, not for today, but the future. And I think all of you that are sitting out there, all of you in the audience, even those sitting up here on the board, take it very, very seriously. And we're going to live here. We're going to live here in the future, and we have to make sure that it not remains the same. We know that change has to happen. We know that. But we do like our neighborhoods, and we do like our neighbors, and we do want to keep something consistently that we bought. And there's some type of need to make sure that we have that as a community. So I find it very interesting that one might say that we're doing this or we should do this for an award. This is not about an award at all, not for me at least. Being a leader sometimes is difficult, and we are being a leader. We are taking risk by looking at and re-examining our zoning ordinances. I mean, they were a cobbled mess. We know that. That's what was brought to us as a council 2 years ago. We have a cobbled mess of things for the last 60 years, again, to bring them all together. And that was great. We all supported it. Yep, we want to do that. Then all of a sudden, this is about housing stock now and blanket zoning, and it became really weird for us too, not just for all of you. So when you bring your concerns to us, we've listened. I've listened. I've read a lot of emails. And I hope I love the democracy, right? I love all of you participating. That is just so wonderful that you guys got entrenched in this and spoke and made yourselves known to what your position was on this. And you dug in the documents and read just like I did. But we have listened. And while I don't have everything in this document I want, and as you guys can see, I made amendments to make things change, I'm going to support this. I'm going to move it forward. But I'll tell you right now, I'm going to be the watchdog. I'm sure there will be others that will make the same comment, but I will be the watchdog, that we don't have mission creep when it comes to our residential neighborhoods. They're important. They're essential. We have to have balance, as one gentleman said, and I apologize for not acknowledging who you are. One of you mentioned that we need that housing stock. We need both. And we have to do that to support industry that comes in here and jobs. And we also need we need that as well. So, it's all a matter of not just about what land we currently have, but what we may annex in the future. And I'm an advocate for annexing more land in the future and talking with our neighbors and our communities. This isn't just about us either in the city of Holland. This is about everyone. And even Holland raises some red flags. Holland Township has raised some red flags about a moratorium and on additional housing stock, right? They've even said that. Everybody's around the table talking about it. There's not just the city of Holland. And it is a regional issue. And we have players that play a part of that. And I'm proud to be among them to talk about those issues. But essentially, I don't agree with everything, but I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, something of that nature, right? I'm not going to do that. And just like there's other issues that came before us that was very heated and debated, and we have to make decisions. We have to vote on things, and we have to do what's in the best interest of everyone, not just a few. So I will say that I've listened to you deeply and tried to understand what your needs are. And I hope that by us passing this, and which again, I'm going to support it and pass it, that we're doing the right thing. And I hope you guys keep us honest. I hope you're sitting in those seats a year from now and making sure that we're doing what we said we're going to do this, how we're going to implement this. And you're keeping us honest going forward. So thank you for attending, those listening, thank you for those that are listening, and thank you for my colleagues as well as the staff for all the work they've done on this.
Thanks, Scott. Dave?
Yeah, thank you. There was a gentleman who was here earlier who had made a request for someone to clarify what the changes were, although he left. So, but maybe if someone could do that, just to clarify the motions when we get to that point, that would be cool.
I can do that right now for you if you want.
No, wait.
Okay. All right. I'll do it. I promise
if
I'll
you
do it
don't
right
mind.
before the vote.
Not to tell you what to do,
All right.
because you're the mayor and stuff. But, I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating. I want to thank the Planning Commission and the staff. Jen, I'm so glad that you're here to hear this and to see the culmination of your work, whether it's what you expected or not. This has been a monumental effort, and a lot of work has gone into it. As Jen has said, there's so much more to this than we've been talking about tonight that is very beneficial. I'll tell you, previously when I've looked at the zoning stuff, you could call it Uncle Frank if you wanted to, as opposed to LDR or R1. Didn't really make that much difference to me because I didn't understand what was there until I got into the meat of it a little bit more. And that's really what this is about. So there is a lot more to this than what we've been talking about, much more to be appreciated. The idea is to make it much more accessible and easy to understand and easier for folks to know what they can do, where they live, or in certain areas. Can I put a fence up here? What do I have to do? Blah, blah, blah. It is just a much more efficient vehicle for all of our planning and development needs. So I'm grateful for that. This has been a very weird experience for me because I'm making decisions in an environment that I really don't like to make decisions in. I generally appreciate having the facts before me, being able to analyze that and mull through that stuff and come to conclusions that I think are good, that are workable, that are equitable, that hurt the least amount of people and benefit the most. I'll be quite frank, I think that we could have passed Udo as it was proposed to us. And I doubt very much that life as we know it in Holland would have changed that dramatically. And I know that many of you will disagree with that. But, you know, we all know that change is inevitable. If you don't believe it, go home and look in the mirror and ask yourself what your theory of change is when you see that. We know things are going to change. And we also know that there are parts of our experience here that we value and cherish. I hear the stories of folks who purchase a home in a neighborhood because they have expectations of how they want to live, how they want to raise their families, that it's a good environment, and the expectation is that that's going to remain the same over who knows how long. And it may, or it may change a little bit. The reason that I'm in favor of these changes is not so much because I believe wholeheartedly in the value of those changes, but as I've said before, I think we're dealing with some major cheese moving here on the part of a lot of folks in a unique point in history that, at least in my lifetime of 60-some years, I forget how many now, so you know I'm old. I've never experienced it before. There's a political climate that we've endured that has been challenging, that has sort of, I think, put us at a point where we question what's real, what is true, what can we trust. At least that's what I felt. We've come through a year and a half or more of a pandemic that I've never seen before. Probably many of us haven't. That's changed life dramatically. We couldn't go to church. We couldn't be with our families. We couldn't watch loved ones pass away. We couldn't be with them. It was a crazy, ridiculous, extremely upsetting time. All of our norms were thrown out the window. And again, now we face this. And my sense is that there's many of us who feel as though here's one more thing, the thing that I had some control over, my refuge, where I spent the last 18 months because I couldn't go anywhere else, where I know this is safe and good. Now that's being challenged. My impression, someone spoke of impressions before. I appreciate your description of that. My impression is that this too is under fire. That may or may not be true, but it's real. And I think a lot of folks in this community are feeling that. And that's primarily the reason why I feel that this path forward is necessary now. In 10 years, things may change. It'll be another council then, and it's going to be their problem. Maybe some of you, I don't know. And the population of this town will change in that period. And it may come to a point where we re-evaluate this and we say maybe some changes wouldn't be so bad. Maybe we can increase density a little bit. Maybe maybe the world isn't going to crumble if we do this or that. Maybe not. But I hear a little bit of what Jenna is saying, in that, you know, we can discount some of what's been proposed in this UDO as not being relevant, but I think we do have to keep an eye toward the future. If you look at the group in this room right now, I see very few young people, and I guess I would be generous with the term young for some of those who are here. Certainly not me, but that's what we should be focused on. That's the future that we're working toward, that we're doing what we're doing now to prepare this town for the next generation to take over, to give them something that's better than we had, like our parents did, to give them a community that they feel comfortable in, that they can afford. So I'm done rambling on. I've said more than I should have probably, but I just want folks to know kind of where my head is on this. I'm going along with this because I think it's the right move for the community at this point, not necessarily because it's the right thing to do, if you get my gist. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. And before we move on to anyone else, I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible what it is that we are talking about and what you just so eloquently discussed without having a clear understanding of what you're voting on. Taking the recommendation as proposed by the Planning Commission with 3 changes. And those 3 changes are on the screens in front of us, and I believe on the screens in front of the audience as well. One change in TNR, leaving the multifamily unit eligibility the same as it currently is at 4,800 square feet of lot area per unit and 60 feet of frontage. A change in LDR to remove from the UDO eligibility for properties 10,000 square feet or greater to have owner-occupied attached ADUs or 2-unit conversions. And the third change, to change the minimum parking requirement in the North Downtown Form-Based Code zone from a minimum required 1 space per unit to a minimum required 1.2 spaces per unit. Is that clear as it can be?
That's great.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Anyone else? Yes, Quincy.
Yes, I did want to make an amendment regarding the comment I made earlier.
All right. And what's the amendment?
So, Ryan, you might have to help me, but, in the TNR section, to have all conversions viewed and approved or denied by the zoning board of appeals.
We can make those changes. Maybe Jenna can point out this actual section numbers, but that would change from the zoning administrator currently to the zoning board of appeals.
Well, I don't have the actual section number in my head, but I would say it's in Article 12. Though, to be clear, it's not one standard for TNR. It's a standard for all zone districts. So it would not just be applicable to TNR zone district.
Okay, then, I would like to make that for all zoning districts.
And just be clear, by conversions, you mean conversions from one number of dwelling units to another number of dwelling units?
Correct.
For residential property. Yeah.
Okay. So to reiterate that, the amendment motion is to require, if there's going to be any conversion from one number of units to another number of units anywhere within the city of Holland, it has to be approved by the zoning board of appeals. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there support?
Just so that everyone's listening and as well as the board, can you clarify zoning board of appeals, what their responsibilities are?
What their responsibilities would be? Sure. Currently, under the proposed UDO, where there's a conversion that requires a review by the zoning administrator, an application has to be made, it's reviewed by the zoning administrator, notice is given to neighbors within 300 feet as required by state law. And then if no one requests a public hearing, then the zoning administrator makes a decision. If someone requests a public hearing, then it does go to the Board of Appeals. The change would say that instead of the zoning administrator having the first review, it would go straight to the zoning Board of Appeals. They would make a decision based on the same standards that are in the ordinance. But it would be a public hearing before the zoning Board of Appeals as opposed to a non-public hearing by the zoning administrator. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
So there's a motion on the floor. It has not received support. And I'm not seeing support. Ron, I've not done this before. What do I officially need to say that that motion fails for lack of support, or did I just say it?
You just said it.
All right. All right. Any other comments, discussion by council members on the thrice amended motion that is currently on the floor? Yes, Raul.
Yeah, I just appreciate Senor Hoekstra's wisdom and I think perfectly articulated words. And I think in many ways it's though I were speaking. No, not really. Far from it. Yeah, because I think there was a lot to be said, and I think you covered it all pretty thoroughly and well. The only thing that I would leave or have yet to say is just in the kind of the motion and the amendment with LDR. I think in our discussions in study session, I think what was originally recommended for our approval for those changes in LDR with UDO and the having owner-occupied attached ADUs or 2-unit conversions, I think is an opportunity. And the main reason that I will vote it as amended is because of that issue that rests at the state level around short-term rentals, because that would could potentially have a bigger impact, on that decision. And so my hope is that this conversation will, circle back around after that is dealt with, and we have more information on that. Won't be on my, in my time here on council, I'm sure, but we're under different circumstances. I think I would have pushed harder for us to adopt that as originally recommended.
Thank you, Raul. Any other comments from council members on the motion? Yeah. Go ahead, Quincy.
I won't say a lot, but I think a lot was covered already that I wanted to say. So one of the things is this has been a long process, and you know, one of the things that I continuously hit is community engagement, and I think this has been really good community engagement. And one of the things that I want you to hear is been spoken up here, but I just want to repeat that, is that we did hear, we did listen, and we did hear what you had to say. A lot of emails that were read, as was mentioned earlier. We're here to represent our community, and it's a lot easier to represent our community when we have community involvement and engagement. So thank you for doing that for us this time, and please don't stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Quincy. Any other
I'll
comments?
just say one more
Nikki?
thing. It is a beautiful document. I mean, it's physically beautiful, and it brings together everything. We've left out the parts that were not able to be acceptable at this point, but otherwise, I appreciate, I've been on 2 different planning commissions. Nobody wants to touch ordinances. They add on cell phone towers, but they don't redo an ordinance completely like this. So I hope, as you said, Jenna, I hope everyone appreciates this, but thank you, like Council Person Byrd and Corbin both said, thanks for the community for participating.
Anyone else? Mike?
Go without.
Oh, I know.
Oh, jeepers.
Just a piece of clarification, and it was brought up a couple of times. I heard mission creep. I heard this is opening the door. What you have to understand is that we cannot control future councils. As much as we'd love to, we cannot. It was brought up here earlier. We had a change to the ordinance by allowing detached ADUs. That was an ordinance change. That was because the public had asked for it. This whole process was because the public had asked and had input. They wanted simplification of the code. This started over 3 years ago. Some people are still saying that we're rushing it. Well, 3 years to me is not rushing it, but to each his own. That's what makes up this great community. That's what makes up our dialogue. That's what makes up democracy. We may agree, we may not agree. That's why God put us on this earth. So let me dispel that misnomer that we can control the future, because we cannot. It would, if there was a public opinion a couple of years down the road, very similar to the detached ADUs about 5 or 6 years ago, that council would have to deal with it at that time. And no matter what we do right now, we can't do anything about it. We cannot stop them from the future. It's not logical, it's not right. So hopefully that helps with that area there. I also want to thank everybody that was involved in this. I've been around a long time. There's only been a couple of subjects that have brought in this much public input, and it's absolutely fantastic. It makes some long nights, it makes some dissension, it makes some strange bedfellows. But this is what public democracy is all about. I couldn't be prouder of it. And not everybody's going to agree. Again, that's what public democracy is all about. We have to compromise. I think this documentation with the listening, first of all, the Planning Commission listened and pared things down considerably from what was originally put out there. Council has, they had their job, they did it, okay? They made a recommendation. We are doing our job right now. The ordinance language falls on us. We have listened. And again, not everybody got what they wanted. I'm not going to say, oh, well, but we try the best we can. And not everybody's going to be happy. And yes, we represent everybody, whether we agree or not. a little bit of a kick out of that. You're here to represent me. Well, yeah, I am. But this is a weird thing, folks. There's two sides to every story. So yes, we are representing the best we can from what we hear. So this whole engagement has been a great, good way to say goodbye. You think, Raul? So thank you. Thank you to the community. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the Planning Commission. Thank you to my fellow council members. This is more than likely going to change in the near future. Who knows? Community is going to change in the future. But that's what the ordinance is, and that's what we do. So, thank you very much.
Anyone else? There's a benefit to being mayor, and that's that I get to go last. It is truly a blessing to be part of this group. There is not a single comment that has been made that I disagree with from any of you. I too want to thank everyone. This has been a long process. And as all good cities do, we in Holland plan for the future. As Dave said, our goal is to try to plan for what's coming, and that's difficult. This Unified Development Ordinance was born out of the city's 2017 master plan 4 years ago. It's designed to implement 54 out of the 99 action steps that came out of that master plan. It is well researched, it is thoughtful, and it is forward thinking. I do also want to thank the Planning Commission. It consists of some of us that are elected officials, a staff member, but otherwise community volunteers who over almost 3 years did double or triple duty working with city staff and consultants to draft the initial proposal. And last December, they asked for public input. They got it. And they made changes and adjustments based on that public input before making their recommendation to council this year. I joined that process about halfway through, and it was a big job even for the half that I was involved in. Most of the Planning Commission, the staff and the consultants worked on the UDO at least twice as long as I did. They deserve our appreciation. They love and care about this city and its future as much as anyone else did. And they stepped up and they put in the countless hours to work to help to make it the best that it can possibly be. I want to thank them all. I also want to make sure that I thank the members of the public who made their voices heard. As Mike, you just said, citizen engagement. Quincy, as you said, as others said around this dais, we love it. We do. We love getting the emails. We love knowing what's going on, because otherwise, how do we know if we are serving you as best that we possibly can? One of the goals of this council is to increase community engagement. We want to hear what you think, and we do listen. You too stepped up. Planning Commission stepped up, but you did as well, because you live here. This is your home, and it's clear that you love and care about it as much as we do and as much as the Planning Commission does. You attended many meetings, both in person and online. I said many times to people in the public, can you believe over 100 people showed up on a Tuesday night for a Planning Commission meeting? That never happens to talk about. They're talking about zoning, and they sat through the entire meeting. That's unheard of. Thank you. You called us, you met with us, you sent us letters and emails, and we did read them all. You let us know what you liked, and you let us know what you didn't like about the Unified Development Ordinance. We listened to you, and we made changes because of what you said. I want to thank all of you. This council is dedicated to civil discourse. We heard it earlier in the meeting. This is an incredibly functional body. Believe me, we don't always agree with one another. We don't always see the world the same way. We have different ideas about the best path to take for the community we love. But what we do share is a love and caring for this community. And we share a dedication to work together, to seek out, to work for, to compromise toward to find the best solutions possible for the city that we love and the people that live here. I want to thank all of the members of this council for encouraging that civil engagement and for being dedicated to the civil discourse. Yes, Mike, it does make strange bedfellows at times. This is how the process is supposed to work. It's not an adversarial process. It doesn't have to be, but rather it's a collaborative process. We don't always agree, but we collaborate with one another to try to find solutions that are best for the community. We don't always agree. But you know what? That's okay. The important thing is that we have the conversations with one another and we listen to one another and we learn from one another. It's very likely that the outcome of this or any process, as Mike, you said, is not exactly what all of the participants may have wanted. That's called compromise. And that's exactly how this process is supposed to work. By working together, by listening to each other, by staying engaged, by trying to understand each other's viewpoints and compromising, we can create better solutions together than we could ever create on our own. It was mentioned earlier tonight, and it was not lost on me, that the Planning Commission passed their UDO recommendation by a vote of 9-0. It was unanimous because the planning commissioners also listened, and they learned, and they compromised. And by the end of the process, they had crafted a recommendation that was not exactly what any one commissioner would have wanted, but it was a recommendation that every member could support. I think it's impressive that in the over 300 pages of the UDO, City Council amended 3 areas. That's saying something. The council amendments came because we listened, we learned, and we applied new information, as Raul said. We learned some new things in this process. Not only did we learn that the state government might take away our ability to be able to regulate short-term rentals, but also that in the last 21 years, no one, 0 people have converted from a single family to a multifamily unit in TNR. None. That was new information for this body. We came to our conclusions here not because of an adversarial process, but because we engaged in civil discourse and collaboration and compromise. As I said, this is exactly how this process should work. My fellow council members, it's time to implement 54 of the 99 outcomes of the 2017 master plan. It's time to update and to consolidate our decades-old zoning and planning laws that are scattered throughout the city code. It's time to make it user-friendly. Holland is a city that plans. We've done our homework, and we've done it well, and it's time to put our plans into action. This single unified development ordinance will make Holland a leader in planning and development, and it will make it more understandable for everyone who wants to improve their property. As Dave said, whether you are a homeowner just trying to build a fence or you're an investor redeveloping a tired strip mall. I want to thank everyone who played a role in this process. I'm proud to have served with all of you along the way. Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Trethewey.
Yes.
Aaronsworth.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Peters. Yes. Garcia.
Yes.
And Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Dave, you said you wrote down at the beginning of this how long that was going to take. Did you want to do the math for us while we move on to the next agenda item?
Sorry, that was 2 hours and 8 minutes.
And with 2 hours and 8 minutes on that agenda item, I think that we should likely take a break for a moment. Let's take a 10-minute break to give people the ability to get refreshed a little bit. Quincy wants a 5-minute break. We'll see how quickly we can get back here, between 5 and 10 minutes. And we're also going to see if city staff can maybe see if the air conditioning can get turned back on in here. Can you hear us over there, Mr. Peters, if we do the staff report while you're filling up the water? All right. We are back in session on item 10B, recommendation of approval of Code of Ordinance amendments to repeal, add, amend, and renumber chapters and sections for final adoption. Mr. Van Dyken.
Yes, Mayor. These next two items are really housekeeping items based on the action that you just took. Ron can better explain them, and I'm not sure how much in depth you want to get on these, but I'll let Ron explain further.
Go ahead, Mr.
There is not a lot of depth to these. The first one that you have before you would be item 10B, is a set of ordinance sections that, well, let me back up. When UDO was put together, basically staff, to say it clearly, I guess, robbed certain chapters of sections to put them into UDO. And that left some sort of cannibalized chapters. And so what we did with this ordinance is take those remaining sections and put them in other places where they fit together better. We didn't change the substance of them, but we moved them to make them fit with the other sections. And that's why you'll see that certain chapters are repealed, and then these sections that are adopted are the sections that were in those. We're just moving them.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked at the Planning Commission level, and I think I asked at the first reading of this or maybe the study session. There are no substantive changes to the ordinance code whatsoever. We are just moving things around. This is all administrative and renumbering in nature, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions for staff? No. What's the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Motion to adopt 10B, recommendations to appeal the Code of Ordinance amendments to repeal, add, amend, and renumerate chapters and sections for final adoption.
Moved by Corbin. Support by Trethewey. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Byrd.
Yes.
Peters. Yes. Garcia.
Yes.
Trethewey.
Yes.
Aaronshorst.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
And Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, item 10C, recommendation of approval of Code of Ordinance amendments to align with the Unified Development Ordinance. Mr. Van Dyken.
We'll throw this one right back to Ron.
Mr. Vanderveen.
Many places in our ordinance code it refers to Chapter 39 on zoning, and many of those are specific sections. And so we've gone through, and I shouldn't say we, Jenna has gone through and done a great job of finding all these places. And so we've taken all those sections that have those references, and we've revised them so that they refer to the right sections.
All right.
And that's what this doesn't change the text, it just changes the references.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question that I just asked you before. No substantive changes whatsoever to Code of Ordinances. This is all just administrative.
Correct.
Correct. Any other questions for staff? Mr. Corbin, what's the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Motion to approve as a recommendation.
Moved by Garcia.
Support.
Supported by Corbin. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Peters. Yes. Garcia.
Yes.
Trethewey.
Yes.
Aaronshorst.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I believe we are now down to item 12D2, report from the Compensation Commission. Mr. Van Dyken.
Yes, this item was removed from consent by Councilmember Trethewey. This is a recommendation from the Compensation Commission that the salaries of the mayor and city council members be increased by 2.75%.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff, or what is the pleasure of council in regard to this item? Mr. Trethewey, who pulled it off of consent and put it under regular agenda.
To open discussion, motion to adopt recommendation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. Is there any discussion, Mr. Trethewey?
Yes, there is.
All right.
In full disclosure, and now that this will be, and it always has been, but just the mayor is going to be compensated in the astronomical fee of $12,891.02
Per meeting?
per annum. The mayor pro tem is at $7,077.42 per annum, and council members are at $6,445.51 per annum.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Did we break that down into hourly paid? Is it
$1 an hour.
Okay, I was thinking 2, but.
I was not done yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Continue, please, please.
So as I have done in the past, I've got a couple of bad reputations, and one of these is I don't do this for the pay. I have voted against every pay increase that has ever been given to me. I usually get outvoted, but it is very, it's close to my heart that I don't do this for the pay. Some people ask me why I do it at all, but it's because I enjoy serving the citizens. I actually enjoy working with all of you and staff. So I will be voting no on this. I don't know why they even bothered to put it on the consent agenda, because they knew I'd pull it off, just like alcohol on public streets. But no, that's my feelings. It's the will of the council. I appreciate the offer, but I will, and I have in the past donated the increase back to some charitable organization.
So you're telling me you're only collecting the salary that you originally received in 1961?
Mm-hmm. 1996.
All right, any other discussion by council members?
Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. Hoekstra.
If I may, just for a moment. I appreciate Brother Mike's sensibilities on this, and have listened to this same thing for a lot of years, and I still appreciate the sentiment with which he offers it. I don't think any of us do this because of the pay. That would just be crazy. But I find it a very good thing that the discussion of this, the determination of it, is done completely divorced from us. And I think that's appropriate in the way that it should be. We don't want to be voting ourselves raises or whatever. And the fact that, I'm assuming it was the founding fathers or a few iterations after those folks determined that it was prudent for council members to receive a stipend of some sort. Maybe back then it was to buy beer or something, I don't know, or cigars. But that being the case, that precedent was set a long, long, long time ago. And I feel for a reason. I'm obviously not here to make a lot of money, but if that's the sentiment that was expressed and acted on way back when, I'm perfectly fine to let it continue. I don't want anything to do with determining what those levels are. In fact, I think the normal procedure is that this just goes into effect normally unless we take action on it. I don't think we really...
Supermajority.
Yes, I don't think we really have to vote in order for it to go into effect, but nonetheless. Just to say I appreciate Mike's thoughts on this, his position on it, and also to offer my own point of view that it's good that this is separated from our purview. That's all.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Lynn?
Yeah, I would just like to thank the people of Holland for actually giving us some compensation. I did not know that there was a compensation when I ran for this office, so that was exciting. I mean, it wasn't super exciting, but it was pretty exciting. But what I would like to say is that we all can afford to do this. You know, at whatever level we can afford to do this. We spend a lot of time on committees and sitting around this table and reading and prepping and talking to community members. We spend hours and hours and hours a week, and we can, at whatever level, can afford to do this because we have spouses or we have an income that allows us to do this. So there are lots of people out there that could do this too, but can't because they need to make more money, or they need to work longer hours, or they can't meet at night, or whatever. So I think it's just an interesting conversation to have. How do we, you know, is there a way to, I mean, and again, I'm not suggesting we raise this while I'm sitting here, but just that is a limitation. for people running for office because they can't commit.
Any other comments? Mr. Parliamentarian, how do we handle this in regard to a vote? Do we take a vote on this? You tell me, because you've been doing this for eons.
I think in all transparency, we probably should have a roll call vote on this.
All right.
And as Brother Huxter said, it is not necessary because unless there is a 2/3 votes to rescind it of the council, it automatically goes into effect. But
The motion is in the affirmative, however.
correct.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion?
Just a.
Oh, yeah, Raul.
Quick comment, because of what Councilman Raymond just said. I mean, when I ran, I knew I was gonna take a pay cut to be able to do this. But I was fortunate enough that I bought a house right in the market, when it was affordable to me, and was able to benefit from some of the city programs to get me into that space, so it was an inhabitable home. And that's really it's been affordable housing that has allowed me to do what I do, which is why I'm so passionate about that topic. Because you're right, there are a lot of people who I think could do this and contribute an immense amount to the future of the city who can't do it. So I appreciate that, and while I don't do it for the money, because I did take a pay cut, thank you.
Thanks, Raul. Anyone else? Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
No.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin,
No.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, and Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item E 3.1, approval of agreement with the Outdoor Discovery Center Network, ODC Network, for construction of playground at Window on the Waterfront. Mr. Van Dyken.
Yes, normally Travis from the ODC and Andy would be here, but due to the uncertain nature of our ending time for this agenda item this evening, they graciously accepted the offer to not be here this evening and have me fill in. I think you're all aware of the outdoor-based playground that will be going in with your approval of this contract at Window on the Waterfront Park. We've attached a rendering here. Ron has worked with the contract, but essentially the ODC will pay for all costs to put the outdoor-based playground in, and then we will take over maintenance once it is completely installed. As you know from our discussions in the past, we've actually done the soil borings. Just last week, they finished up out there at Window on the Waterfront for all of the soil borings and have put a high priority in this area. We hope to have that information back soon. And then the ODC, with your approval, would proceed with the construction of the outdoor-based playscape at Window on the Waterfront Park.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Did they
Mr.
meet their fundraising target?
My understanding is that their fundraising has been very, very successful, and their patronicity target has been hit.
Oh, great.
It sounds like there's a lot of interest in this from anywhere from fairly good-sized donors writing some big checks to a lot of little smaller checks that add up to one big project out there at Window on the Waterfront.
Great. Other comments?
Just a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Matt, just to give us a little bit of orientation here, I believe that this is due north of Central Avenue Extension, correct?
Actually, no. So if you know Window on the Waterfront Park, 6th Street,
Yes.
where the tulip fields are,
Yes.
and there's a statue, a bronze statue that's up there.
Yes.
So if you think of where the peaking station is, this would be immediately to the east of the peaking station and a little bit to the north. If you go out there, you can see where those sidewalks kind of come together, which you see on the rendering. And there's a little open space that's really not used for anything. There's no tulip beds in here. It's just really grass that doesn't get used right now. So that's where this would be at Window on the Waterfront. You know where the hill is? That's actually the tank. This is just back from
I
that.
was just going to say by the old original water tank.
Yep, just back from that.
Okay.
I'm assuming our Parks Department will maintain this. This is not a discovery.
That is
Park?
correct. So the
Okay.
agreement lays that out specifically,
Right.
that once the playscape is 100% complete, then we would take over the maintenance of the facility. Now, that being said, we have a good working relationship with ODC. This is actually, they have staff members that install these all over the place. If we got into a significant maintenance issue further down the road, we would probably bring their staff in as expertise to help us make any kind of major repair that was far down the road, but that would be our responsibility.
Dave?
Yeah, I want to ask a question you may or may not be able to answer, but first of all, I think there's a tremendous idea and a great project, and I'm all for it. I'm just curious in the thinking this through and where the location wound up, is this going to be compatible with like future development on window on the waterfront, as nebulous as that is at this point? I know nobody really knows what that is, but we're confident that this will jive with whatever else might happen.
Yeah, we're very confident that this would jive with whatever is going to happen out there. As you know, when we talk about the ice skating rink, we talk about bathroom facilities. So there's porta potties out there now. We're hoping that we're not hoping, but when we do build the ice rink, there will be public restrooms that will help service this. And then obviously the reconstruction of 6th Street kind of ties into all that and brings that all together. But no, the developable properties, this is not where those would be.
Good answer. Thank you.
So that makes me think of, I got a call from someone who asked, what about the signage, this whole window on the waterfront area? Some of the old signs are down, and I know there's a transition with the new orange signs. So is that part of that maintenance of that whole window on the water, the trail kind of going from Freedom Village on down to the wastewater?
Yeah, so we anticipate a lot of changes to happen in that area. Some of those pathways are new, right? They were just redone, but we anticipate in the future we'll be looking at lighting, maybe sooner than later out there, and a lot of different things. So the signage specifically, if there are specific signs that are down, the Parks Department would just replace those as needed. There is one right at the end of College Avenue Extended that is going to have to get replaced at some point too, because that's likely where some things are going to go. So I don't know that I actually answered your question, but any signage is just kind of part of the Parks Department's revolving maintenance fund. This is not specifically part of that, although we would likely add a sign for this to bring the public's attention to it.
And just a point of clarification, those signs were designed before I was mayor.
You can say that.
Any other questions? Yeah, Quincy and then Raul.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question. If you have not had the privilege to walk down that path that Nikki just spoke on, it's beautiful. They cleared the trees, and we go down there frequently, either walking or riding our bikes, and you can see everything now versus a wall of green. So it's beautiful out there. People fishing and just hanging out now. It seems more accessible, even though it's not. It's just the wall of green is gone. So take a trip out there. And I wanted to know about completion dates and timing and all that stuff.
So this can go in fairly quickly. We need to wait until we get the information back from the soil borings. Until that happens, we just need to have that information before we can move forward, which we anticipate is going to be very soon. I believe preschool goes back in session in mid to late August for the ODC preschool downtown, and they are hopeful to have at least portions of this completed by then. So we're talking about, I don't want to hold them to that specific date, but we're talking about this year, like construction soon, within the next week or two, if possible.
Raul?
Yeah, when this project was initially presented to us, I think I was mostly intrigued, but happy to support it because of all the collaboration, the partnership, and ultimately the community support around it. And I think an amenity that was definitely lacking kind of in that space. But I recently visited the ODC, and I didn't even know that space had been redone, because we usually just go to the trails and then hit the Hawk Park. So finally visited what they have out there, and I was impressed, and that got me to be really excited about this new park. I think it's going to be unique. I think it is going to be an attraction, and I'm going to take my kids there often while you guys are meeting here.
Anyone else? Mr. Corbin? No? Yes?
The top of the recycling bins are orange. That was after you were married.
I'm sorry, I think that's out of order.
My apologies, my apologies.
All right, we do not have a motion on the floor yet in regard to this item, if I'm remembering correctly.
Motion to adopt recommendation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Garcia. Any further discussion? Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Trethewey,
Yes.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters, Garcia,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, 6.1, gifts. Brenda, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts. Parks and Recreation, Sal Perez Scholarship Program, cash receipts $16. Public Safety Department, Canine Program, in-kind donation by Signs by Tomorrow, signage for the Canine Golf Outing valued at $877.73. And Police Safety Department Fire Operations, Fire Safety T-shirt sales, $30. It is recommended these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Thank you. And what is the pleasure of council?
Motion to accept with appreciation.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Communications from the Assistant City Manager. This is your chance, Matt.
It is 9:40 at night, so I have nothing this
All right.
evening.
I do have a very long text message from Keith that he asked me to read, but I'm kidding. All right, next is appointments and communications from the mayor. I have a couple of recommended appointments. I recommend that the city council accept the appointments of Michael Moran to the Holland Satellite Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority with a term ending December 31 of 2022. Jeff Minkus to the Human Relations Commission, term expiring June 30, 2024. Jennifer Jones to the Police Community Relations Commission, term expiring December 31, 2024. And please accept the resignations of Craig Hall from the Holland Satellite Smart Zone Local Development Finance Authority, effective July 21, 2021, and Jessica Kreger from the Human Relations Commission, effective May 20, 2021.
So moved to Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support?
No, that's okay.
Support by, I give that to Corbin, I think. No, oh, it's Aaron's horse. We'll give that to Nikki. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Appointments, motions, and communications from council members. Mr. Trethewey, I'll call on you first.
Okay. It looks like I have a recommendation that I will put in the form of a motion to amend the City Council Chapter 1, Sessions of Council 1.1 of the Rules of the City Council. And that change will be that we will change, if approved, the meeting times of, for sure, the business meetings of the first and third Wednesday of each month from 6:30 to 6 p.m. And I don't think we have the rules of council, but that also, that is not part of the rules of council. The study sessions will also start at that same time, is what the understanding was.
Oh, the alternate weeks of 6
Yes.
PM.
The study session, so we're consistent across the board.
Yep.
6
Yep.
p.m.
And that was in the form of a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. Any discussion by council members? Seeing none, Brenda, would you please call the roll?
Corbin,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Peters,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Trethewey,
Yes.
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I do not believe we have any first readings of ordinances. That leaves one remaining motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Trethewey. Is there support? Support by Peters. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
All right.
Thank you all.